Two. You notice that, Tyler? I'm glad you appreciate these little things. At least someone does. These little flourishes I have. Everyone's ragging on your bass. Honestly, I was a little disappointed at first with my bass that I created last night in the inaugural installment of No Rob Sky. It's a late night gaming sesh last night, and I launched the official TRRS No Rob Sky series. I was a little disappointed with my bass at first, but honestly, it kind of grew on me. It kind of grew on me throughout the game. I like the little awning now. It's got a little porch. I didn't exactly put it there on purpose, but I think it has a nice little vibe that I kind of enjoy. It was fine once you got the roof on. Eventually I can get some more levels on there. You know, this is just a very, more like all Rob Sky. There we go. Very rudimentary little shelter. I'm still kind of getting the hang of this. In all honesty, like, I would probably like to just do that all day. If I felt like, frankly, if I felt like I could actually, like, maintain an audience and, like, you know, hit my daily goals and stuff, I would probably just retire right now to do that. I would just retire to play that game on here. That's not what the people want, though. The people want the subversive commentary, trying to overthrow civilization, with the Western civilization and all that stuff. You know, I can't just be a chill gaming guy. I can only do that sometimes. Here for information. The people want pain and demand it. I know. But I will be supplementing the overthrowing of society and the information and the disinformation and this kind of stuff. I will be supplementing that with further installments of No Rob Sky after the inaugural installment last night. I'm happy to get back into that game though. I really enjoyed it. I'm here for the ASMR. Okay, that's good. I really enjoyed it though. I really enjoy that feeling of discovery at the very beginning.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Here's to 12 more months of No Rob Sky.
Mondo Michel, thank you so much. 12 entire months of Prime from Mondo Michel. Thank you, Mondo Michel. 12 more months of No Rob Sky. Here. To be fair, I was asleep. That's why I wasn't there. Well, it's like this seems to be the only time I can squeeze in these sessions. King Uendo. Because of my lifestyle. I gotta kind of get that going around probably 10 p.m. at the earliest Eastern. No Man's Sky is a fun screensaver. Yeah. No, it's I really like the ambient synth music. It's like really relaxing. I find it's a relaxing gaming experience. The ambient synth music, discovering new planets, interacting with weird little guys. It's just a algorithmically generated universe of little guys for you to discover, and some medium-sized guys and some big guys. It is a great chill-out game. I'm gonna get some more of that going soon. And eventually we can do some community stuff. No Robs hold up half the sky. That's right. I stand back and allow others to do it. It's what Spore wanted to be back in the day. Yeah, Spore came up last night when we were playing. And I remember kind of enjoying Spore, but it's nowhere near on the same level. What size guy is your fave? Probably like a good medium-sized guy. Little to medium-sized. That's the weird little guy sweet spot. I'm gonna dig out my disc and update and check it out again. We can be your weird little guys for this stream. Fart Party 69, you're absolutely one of the weird little guys. There's no question about that. I wouldn't really play games like that. I want some conflict and competition. Well, I guess with this game, once you get further into it, you can get into that kind of stuff, like if you want to. You can get into space piracy and all kinds of stuff. All kinds of shenanigans. This is my understand it. Not me, of course. I'm peaceful. I'm very peaceful. Happy Friday to you, Alana. I'm a weird little guy. I remember the Spore hype. It was insane. Robin Williams helped market it. Then the game was kind of meh. I didn't play a whole lot of it. I did think it was pretty cool. But yeah, probably didn't live up to the level of hype that Spore had. I remember kind of liking it though. Yeah, prayers up for Robin Williams. So sorry I'm a little bit late getting started today. It is a PED day for my kid's school, so he has the day off. So we were just hanging out. We just got back from the park, actually. We were at the park until, 20, 25 minutes ago, which was kind of nice. Hung out at the park. Now I'm here ready to get shit done. Ready to talk about the important issues. And performance-enhancing drugs. That's right. That's how that works. NMS is probably the greatest video game redemption story. Yeah, we were getting into that last night, right? After all the disappointment, the way that they've just added all the features to the game that they kind of hinted at the beginning and then never really delivered on. And ultimately, this kind of turned into the game that they did promise to people. Hanging out with the kiddo sounds great. It was very nice. Yeah, were his last words before falling asleep? I want Dan Simpson's head. I shouldn't encourage the beef between my son and Dan Simpson. I don't think that's something I should encourage. I think Dan's a nice man. I shouldn't. He's pretty young still. I feel a little weird about him being on here with me in the first place. It's a little disconcerting, but he really likes it at the same time. He really likes to be able to come down for 15, 20 minutes and talk about all the stuff he has going on in his mind. He really seems to get something out of that, so it's I'm trying to encourage it, but I shouldn't be encouraging him to get into beefs, right? There's a limit. It's one thing for him to come down here and talk about superheroes for 15, 20 minutes sometimes. Encouraging him to start beefs with people, I think, is probably not healthy. He's starting internet drama, not even drama Monday. That's it. Except for Venom versus Destiny debate. Oh my gosh. No, he really likes it. He often asks now if we can watch back the part from the other day when he was on here talking about all his guys and showing his drawings and stuff. He really likes it. He wants me to save it so we can keep watching it in the future. What I think he wants is for us to have a YouTube channel. Which just that would be a whole other thing. Would that be good to do? I'm at a loss. He watches a lot of YouTube content that's the dad and their kid and playing video games and like doing stuff. He really likes that stuff. But like I don't know, I feel weird about that. I would feel weird about doing that for him. But like if he really likes it and he's into it and wants to be creative and create something, isn't that good though at the same time? I don't know. Please don't become a family YouTuber. Well, I really don't want to, Moss World. Like I'm pretty happy operating in the milieu on social media that I operate in, which isn't exactly compatible with that. It's kind of, you know. I think eventually I might, not yet because he's still pretty young, but I think eventually I might at least like empower him to be able to create stuff and put it out there if that's what he really wants to do. It's the kind of thing that I can tell that he really thinks about it a lot, and he's really like makes him excited and interested. And I think as a parent, it's like you want to encourage that in a way. Without in a healthy way though. That's the tricky part. That's the really difficult part. Can fill the niche of communist family YouTube content. I don't know. Like again, he's still pretty young. Like maybe we'll see in a year or two if he still wants to. And that's what I mean. I kind of want to empower him to be able to create stuff. But figuring out the healthiest kind of avenue for that is tricky. I have mixed feels on this. I love the idea of encouraging that kind of creativity. I hate the idea of inviting all these strangers into your life and monetizing your parental relationship. Wish you could make things just for you guys and not have to upload it. Yeah, that's probably the better way to go about that. Right, Lodane? Yeah, being able to kind of create stuff. I don't know. It's I in all honesty, I just don't know how to navigate that kind of thing at all. My son does some funny YouTube commentary when I'm playing video games. I could make fun YouTube videos. Yeah, like he's funny. Kids can be really funny. That's how Clueless did it when she was a kid. Recorded her own radio shows with a tape recorder. We didn't have the world today to worry about. Well, it's funny for me because I did the exact same thing. I think back about that sometimes, and then I think about what I'm doing like with my life now that I'm in my late 30s. I did that kind of stuff all the time. That's funny. We all had tape shows, yeah. And I'm still doing it. That's right. I'm still doing it today. So I mentioned last night as well, but shout out to the Toronto Raptors. Great season. It was a disappointing game last night. They were 2 quarters. They played really great the first half. They were 2 quarters away from forcing a game 7, and then just gave up a big run and couldn't really get back. And that was the end of the season. But overall, super successful season. It's disappointing, but Philadelphia's got an MVP candidate. They got James Harden, one of the best scorers to ever play basketball. So it's disappointing that they couldn't win, but they still had a really good season. Scotty Barnes, Rookie of the Year. A lot of exciting things about the future to think about. A lot of young guys who are going to still get a lot better. And Barnes in general, Scotty Barnes in general, just seems like he's a future MVP type candidate. Like he seems like there's really no limit to how great he's going to be. Which is just exciting. That's really exciting. I feel like they haven't had a player quite like that in a long time. Scotty getting Rookie of the Year, Pascal All-NBA, Fred an All-Star, and a 5th seed. Can't ask for much more out of this young group. Seriously. And I mean, they're like 5 games out of first place. Like, they had a really good season. Very bright future. The Bulls do too. It's unfortunate what happened with the Bulls with all the injuries they had, because that was a very likable team. Hopefully they have a big, bright future as well. Yeah, successful season. It's disappointing. I'm not gonna lie, but it's definitely significantly less disappointing than if they had gotten swept. The fact that they were able to force that 6th game, I think, that made that a pretty successful endeavor, I think, overall. 2 more playoff games than Dragic. That's right. Yeah. Dragic. What was he doing last night? He's talking trash. Goran Dragic. What's up with this Joker? That's right, we're doing some disinformation training. That's what we're going to do today. That's what we're going to do. We're setting up the ruling class has this shit under control. This disinformation stuff. They're going to be stopping all this. All the right people are in place, are getting in place. We got a girl boss disinformation expert at the helm now, ready to go. I, for one, love our new disinformation czar. Oh boy. I mean, it's just... I feel like this is something we're going to be talking about for a while now. This is like... This disinformation thing. This is why I was pointing out, I think, the other week, when this started affecting people that we might find annoying, or we might disagree with, or find cringe. But the current ramping up in intensity of these disinformation police, it's just like, and who they're funded by and like what their jobs are, it's leading us nowhere good. There was also that piece in the Daily Beast today looking into the secret the secret network of bloggers that are secretly promoting Putin's war and stuff. And it's the nerdiest shit. It's literally just tattling. It's finding people that are presenting an alternate viewpoint of these events and literally just tattling to YouTube and be like, they did not respond to comment about this and it's just like it is the most, it's just loser shit. It's loser shit to me, you know? And like I've been saying when we did our whole segment on looking into the disinformation police the other week, it doesn't, it's not, you don't have to like some of the people that this is being this is affecting. It doesn't matter whether you like them or not. But these like unaccountable NGO backed think tanks and these new like official positions of people that have with connections to the intelligence community, basically, as we'll see looking into this stuff. It's really I think it's a really troubling sign of where we're going here. McCarthyism was also just tattling. It's just pathetic. We're going to look at this in a bit. A friend of the stream, Danny Haifong, was on there, along with the usual suspects and gray zone types and all that. But like, again, it's literally just taking people that are, it's not about disinformation. It's literally just people that are sharing a viewpoint that you don't like. And especially, and like the thing that they frame it around are these big violent incidents and people that ask questions about, who's responsible for these incidents. Which, as we've talked about endlessly, I think is a legitimate question to ask given the people that we're dealing with. And we've asked similar questions on this program. But that's what it's about. That's what it's framed around. But really, yeah, it's about finding people that are sharing an alternative viewpoint to these like big geopolitical events and just saying like, no, you're not allowed to say that. Don't do that. And literally tattling to the social networks that are hosting this content. Tattling to them and trying to pressure them to delete it. This is not a good situation. Like, and this is only going to get worse. This is my problem. We've talked a lot for this show over the last year and a half about this kind of new Red Scare stuff, and that's the kind of thing that I keep coming back to when we talk about this. Is that we're just barely scratching the surface of it. This kind of stuff is really going to get ramped up in intensity, especially if these events continue to spiral out of control. Oh my goodness. Buddy, what are you doing?
I'm just trying to sleep forever.
You're Mr. Incredible? Is it down here? I don't remember if it's down here or not. Yeah, well, don't go right up next to that. It's warm.
I can't find it.
Well, I don't think your Mr. Incredible's down here.
Look at me. I wear goggles.
Buddy, I have to do my stuff now. I was with you. I've been hanging out with you all day.
This dead.
Venom, your Mr. Incredible is recording a show on Twitch.tv right now. Just a moment here. He's really taking his time. He's really taking his time. Hey, what's up, Old Dutch? That's my point, though. It's lame. This disinformation tattling. It's you can see how the seeds were planted, and it's really clear to me, especially with the Russiagate stuff, how much the seeds for this were planted in 2016. And that's one thing I got to say for the people that were really raising the alarm bells about that then. I think I've been proven correct about the planting these seeds of Russophobia, number one, but also this idea of disinformation, specifically weaponized Russian disinformation. Planting this idea around Trump's election, and so many people were receptive to it because they couldn't believe that their whole reality was caving in on itself, and they needed some kind of excuse, some kind of outlet that they could funnel that angst into. And these people, like people online, conspiracy, there's like that Eric Garland guy, and all this big industrial complex, Democrat industrial complex, that really just started talking about this nonstop around this time. And we're really seeing how that's turning into now, especially with this war that has really kicked this into overdrive. And now this idea of if you can link someone to this concept now of weaponized Russian disinformation, regardless of how tenuous it is, and like we've talked about it before, even if you don't agree with someone that's going to go on Twitter or Twitch or YouTube and present this very chauvinistic Russian viewpoint, and 100% uncritically repeat the Kremlin talking points about this or any other issue, you might not agree with that, and I don't agree with it either. What is the end result, though, of us just completely deciding that this is totally out of bounds in our discourse? Right? That's what these people want, basically. They want for someone to do that. Not only do I disagree, but I want that to be completely impossible to articulate this viewpoint on any of these social media networks without being, removed, without having your speech silenced or being removed or whatever. That's where this is going now. And this is my worry, is that these things are eventually not going to be just about the 100% Russian chauvinist Kremlin viewpoint, but it's going to encompass anyone that even asks basic questions about these narratives, or tries to have some kind of nuance, or tries to at least present the other alternative in a kind of journalistic way, as some channels do here on Twitch. As we all know, I like to be nuanced so we can present alternative viewpoints than what we see in this relentless Western narrative, and form an analysis based on all this information rather than only one side of the information. And that's what I think. That's what this disinformation push is about, right? It's about ensuring that people can only form a viewpoint based on this very strict Western version of events. And even pretending anything that's outside of that is legitimate is going to have this really chilling effect, where anyone that tries to incorporate any information outside of this narrow perspective is going to be caught up now in this web of weaponized Russian disinformation, which will, as we all know, will eventually be Chinese disinformation as we progress into this thing, because they're, of course, the big bad of the big baddies of the new Cold War, and Russia's just their the old nemesis that they're having another go around with. That's it. Eventually, anything that goes outside of this perspective is going to be caught in this net of disinformation. And that's what these people want anyway. Like, who knows what's going to happen? But that is the current trend, especially with the sort of neoliberals that are in charge right now. You are allowed to express $33 billion toward Ukraine, but not an ounce of doubt. It's really stunning the amount of money that's been spent on weapons. That's been fun. When we try to think about the amount of weapons that have been just sent to Ukraine, and God knows who has them now, over the last 2 months, it's kind of staggering to even try to wrap your mind around, right? The idea that all these weapons are just going and there's some official government thing, distributing to exactly the right people and these specific troops and stuff, and it's not just this goddamn fucking free-for-all. Ukraine was already incredibly corrupt, right? It's one of the most corrupt countries. It's just been corrupt basically with the pro-NATO, pro-US government lately, rather than a corrupt pro-Russia government or a corrupt pro-de-escalation government. So you have this incredibly corrupt government, which, as we know, has this huge far right element completely legitimized inside the state, inside the armed forces establishment, and we're just funneling tens of billions of weapons into this place in a very short span of time. We were already sending lots of weapons prior to this, right? We've been sending weapons for the last 10 years, but just in the last 2 months, it's been like, let's absolutely flood this place with as many fucking weapons as we can possibly do in this extremely short span of time. Did you see that new interview Rania did with the German guy who was terrified to say anything negative about Ukraine? I mean, this is where this is going. Especially in Europe, it feels like it's even worse, right? And Germany's literally sacrificing their own economy for this. Inflation is hitting Germany harder than anywhere now. Because Germany's deliberately, knowingly cut themselves off from a vast source of energy. A vast source that contributes to their energy needs at the request or demand of the United States. Germany has willingly sacrificed its own economy for this conflict. And now at the same time, if you're in Germany, you're under this insane amount of pressure to not say anything bad or anything positive towards Russia or anything critical whatsoever of this the Western version of events that make up this invasion. I didn't see the disappointing Ilhan tweet. No. If Hunter Biden is involved, it's on the level, of course. Weapons that were literally just selling on the black market to the Zionists and the Saudis. Yeah. It's an absolute shit show. It's been really incredible. The speed with which this has happened and the speed with which it seems like just the vast majority of everyone around us has gotten totally on board with this. Remember, the only thing you want to help Ukraine from the evil Russians that are invading them, and help the poor, sweet, innocent Ukrainians and their beautiful, shining beacon of democracy in Eastern Europe, their Western-style democracy. You want to help them before they're crushed by this horrible, brutal Slavic horde? Well, funnel $33 billion worth of Javelin missiles and rifles and body armor and whatever else in like 6 weeks. That's the only way. That's the only way we can ever help them. It's the only way. I'm sorry, but it's the only way we can ever help them. Just make sure they've got $33 billion of weapons and missiles. And that's going to resolve this. It's so cool being an ally with the U.S. This is what I mean. Whether you're Ukraine or you're Germany, it seems like you're constantly being asked to sacrifice yourself for what is described as these altruistic reasons, but ultimately is for the benefit and well-being and prosperity of the United States of America. This is what's happened in Ukraine now. You know, it's happening in Germany. It happens in Canada. I'm experiencing a wave of revolutionary optimism, having discovered the EMP countermeasures Russia discovered is likely to remove or severely hamper the possibility of mutually assured nuclear annihilation. If it does come to that, empire will be brought kicking and screaming into the future it wanted to burn. I mean, it's good. It speaks to how grim things are if we're experiencing this kind of optimism just by the possibility, maybe the slightly reduced possibility of open nuclear conflict. I'm fed up of talking in circles with socialists, de facto supporting imperialism and fascism under the guise of national sovereignty and anti-communism. Europe is a fucking shit show. Well, Sam, I think that's one of the main indications. I think from 2016 to 2020, 2021, it was easy to get the sense that like the left, like the actual left, was kind of growing, right? And more people kind of embracing the ideas of socialism and starting to talk more critically about foreign policy and these things, and you feel like, oh wow, there's this wave coming of people that are really getting radicalized. And I think this incident has really exposed how much more work there is, and I think how isolated I've certainly felt a lot more isolated and alienated again. And that's why it's been helpful to have this community of people that seem to be more or less on the same page about some of this stuff. But it has really indicated like how far behind we actually are in class consciousness, in like understanding concepts like imperialism, and so on. It feels like we still have a ways to go. And I think there's been active campaigns to undermine and ensure, frankly, that people don't grasp these concepts. I think there have been active ops in place to ensure that this doesn't happen, quite frankly. Ukraine's GDP in 2020 was $155 billion. So just think about the $33 billion the U.S. is sending in context to their GDP. Yeah, like it's just a staggering amount of resources and money that's going into it. It's also just amazing to think of the ability that the U.S. government has to make money appear at any time. We just pulled this $33 billion out of the thin air. And how hollow it rings when they talk about student debt or anything. We can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do healthcare, we can't have a welfare state, we can't do anything, can't build infrastructure. They can just snap their fingers and invent $33 billion out of the air, though. It's just been done to ensure that the weapons contractors get some nice big orders of javelins and other weapons to send off. Cucking yourself for America is just sad. It is sad. It's like, why don't... Eventually, we're going to have... The countries around the West are going to have to wake up to like the losing prospects of continuing this, right? Of continuing to be shackled to this sinking ship. That's what I was talking about the other day in that talk about realignment, which is going to be the first... the first Western Judas country that betrays America, because we all know it's going to come eventually. We all know that it is going to come eventually, and I'm looking forward to that day. It's coming sooner rather than later. I mean, you could kind of see Germany going in that direction, couldn't you? Like if this really does impact the German economy and continues to, like it has been, it's going to provoke this entire generation of people that like are going to resent, I think, not Russia, but the German government and the West, basically, for putting them in that position. I think that's entirely likely as well. It's the same in all European countries. You cannot criticize Ukraine, Zelensky, NATO, or the Western support of all three. Yeah. It's not just Germany as well. I think more that is going to provoke a wave of sort of reaction, which is not going to be good necessarily. The far right's going to organize around this kind of stuff as well, as always. While usually, as always, being not being hindered by the state, but being kind of low-key encouraged. This might lead to the end of the global dollar. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, right? The prospect of de-dollarization and how this seems to have advanced that fairly significantly. Georgia got fucked over by the West. Fucking who else? Who hasn't? What more needs to happen for any nation to learn not to make a deal with the United States of America? Look what happened to Iran. Look what happened to Libya. Why would you make a deal with the United States of America? And then they look at places like North Korea and they say, why they're so unreasonable? Why don't they want to make a deal with us? Why don't they want to do diplomacy? And it's what the hell? They know full well what making a deal with the United States does, what that ultimately means. You got to wonder how many more countries are going to allow themselves to be just openly exploited by this place. The German people have no one in the parliament that will actually give a fuck about them, I guess. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. The opposition party in Germany threatened to oust the PM for not giving enough weapons or sanctioning Russia enough. Yeah. Fuck. Things have always been that bad since the original Cold War. Those nukes never went away. Invented reality stopped needing to remind people about it every odd second until recently. Yeah. I mean, that's that whole end of history. That's when I grew up. That's why it feels strange, I think, to be the age I am now and realize that there's this big divide from my early life and later, when a lot of these things that had kind of faded away or a little faded to the background a little bit, started to pick up in intensity again. Bad time to have an anti-nuclear power guy in charge of Germany. Yeah, I mean, the whole environmental movement of the last 20 years, so much of it has been based around anti-nuclear, which just seems like it's been regardless, I don't want to get into a big debate about nuclear. I know it's not the perfect solution to climate issues, but I feel like the amount of time and resources that have been spent opposing not even nuclear weapons, which is of course a good thing to oppose, but opposing nuclear energy of any kind, has been, I think, a terrible element of the climate movement for the last 30 years. Then a lot of that energy probably could have been spent elsewhere, actually focusing on getting us off of fossil fuels rather than getting us off nuclear power, which is one possible alternative to fossil fuels. Now you've got your Green Party people in Germany that have spent their whole lives opposing this. The link I shared in the replies illustrate your point pretty well, Rob. The libs are fucked up. Which is this? Wow. Yeah, we can take a look at this. Let's get back to some of the chat here. Now everyone wants to join Thiel's monarchist faction. Oh man. All that Thiel funded new right stuff. That's very alarming as well. The Ukraine economy is being propped up by loans from US, NATO, and allies, and the neoliberal rebuild of that country will only benefit that country and not the Ukrainian people. This is the fucking scary thing, right? That you're seeing this scramble of countries to join NATO. And it's like they're so in a hurry to join this alliance now. And they're like, I don't think we've thought through the implications of what that would actually mean if some of these countries did. Like, that means U.S. military bases. That means you're basically agreeing to be occupied by these U.S.-backed forces, right? It means they're going to have to make economic deals as well that's going to be beneficial to America and the Western NATO countries. It's an exploitative agreement. It's not this umbrella of protection. Like, that's the propaganda version of what NATO is. This umbrella of protection against Russian aggression, where you're under the West's wing and the West is protecting you. It's not at all what it is. It's this exploitative relationship. And these countries now are just falling over themselves to join this. Right? They're all falling over themselves to make this deal. Please come exploit us. Please, America, you haven't exploited us enough. And all of the people that are making these decisions, this is all going to happen. None of this is going to actually benefit people that live in these countries. Yeah, ultimately that's it. What the European leadership is doing to themselves is baffling to me. It's wild. So I'm way behind in the chat. I've been like slowly catching up on stuff from the chat, but it's all connected to the same conversation, obviously. Yeah, the food shortages are going to be crazy this summer. Like, this is the thing, we haven't even seen the beginning of the discontent that a lot of the inflation and the shortages are going to lead to. We haven't even seen a glimpse of that. What happens when it goes on for months and months and like it gets worse? Think how think France as an example. The yellow vest protests in France. Like, that was just a glimpse of what some of this shit is going to look like. And the kind of shortages and the fuel taxes that the yellow vest protests were protesting is going to be fucking nothing compared to like the inflation and fuel prices and food prices and other things that we're going to be seeing in France and Germany and elsewhere. Like, it's going to be a fucking shit show. Yeah, Lithuania is a good example, Dakadoon. Lithuania has just been repeatedly just like shooting themselves in the knee, being like hoping America will notice them and reward them for their good behavior. They're just repeatedly screwing themselves over. And of course, as usual, there's no fucking help forthcoming. Just like for Ukraine. Ukraine's like, we voluntarily fucked ourselves over for you as well. Are you going to come invade and help us now? And it's like, no, we're not. No. Chad being very chatty. And in the mind of these European socialist types, it's the national sovereignty and self-determination for a nation to want to join NATO. This is like everything's being like fooled right now. There's something incredibly sinister going on, I think, overall. And a lot of it's been very fucking weird in the West, feeling you're just surrounded by people that are all just like going, yep, yes, please. I love this. This is great to me. You know what I mean? It's extremely alarming. And then it comes back to disinformation and about how this push for disinformation is going to be designed to keeping us in line further. for even because like they have this complete uniform response to this, but it's like not enough for them. Even the people that are not fooled by this fucking mass media campaign are going to be either forced to come along or forced to censor themselves or just like removed from social media. They can't have any alternative viewpoints being presented. I actually don't think anyone else is going to join NATO, though. Well, that's the big question. And how would Russia react if Finland and these countries join NATO? What is Russia just going to say? Okay, well, you're allowed. You go ahead and join. It's only going to continue to escalate this further, and surely people must realize this, right? Lithuania, please notice me, senpai. The U.S. I can't even find you on a map. It's exactly that meme. I don't even think about you at all. I don't even know who you are. New phone, who dis? Imperialism is the primary contradiction. Why can so-called communists not understand this? That's the kind of a frustrating thing, isn't it, Red Scary? It's just, it feels simple. It feels simple, but people have been really conditioned not to accept the basic answer that's sitting there for them, you know? It's just sitting there for you, and you just have to reach out and take it. But people have been so conditioned to be afraid of it. False consciousness, no theory having MFers. Couldn't be us, though. Couldn't be us. Meanwhile, you have this like Solomon Islands stuff as well, where it's like even the idea of China building a possible military base in the Solomon Islands has upset this kind of like rules-based international order so much. And of course, America, with 100 military bases around the world, China wants to build one military base in the Solomon Islands, and they're fucking losing their minds over this. And rather than address what that issue, I think some of these folks that we're talking about, what would they would lean to say is, well, they shouldn't be building military bases. That's imperialism too. Right? So we should be opposed to that. And it's like, that is, I think, really not grasping the basic concept of what imperialism is and why we're opposed to it. Why we're anti-imperialist. Anyway, let me look at this. Oh. So it's amazing that even CTV News is reporting on this. Like, I'm actually surprised to see this. This came out yesterday, April 28th, 2022. Hello, fellow disinformation enthusiasts. Today I learned that Chinese teachers in Pakistan is also imperialism. Oh man, Relok. Oh man. We should probably take a look at that, actually. Is Canada reversing course on Ukraine? Of course not. We'll get to that. Because talk about another alarming sign. Journalists for Western outlets openly encouraging terrorist attacks when they're taking place against Chinese people, look for that to be a trend, right? Considering, the whole Uyghur issue and why that kind of crackdown on extremism in Xinjiang happened in the first place because of these terrorist attacks. If such an attack does happen again, I think you're going to see a reaction from the West that's going to, I think, really illustrate some shifting tides on this. And I think that example that you're giving of that journalist literally like praising someone who carried out an attack against 2 English teachers and a cab driver in Pakistan, I think that's kind of a really alarming trend. And listen, if people are going to have that energy, This
is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hey, Silver, thanks for the raid. Thanks for the raid, Silver. I appreciate it. Invoking Malcolm X's name to prove that it was good somehow. What a disturbing thing. Oh my God. In fact, I want to take a look at this. I'm going to cue this up so I don't forget to look at this. But you know what? If you're going to have that energy about... This is good to take a look at. Lots of stuff to talk about today. Where's that thread? Could someone post that thread in the chat, though, of the person that did that thread about the woman that carried out the terrorist attack? Yeah, here we go. Sorry, I found it. This is disturbing, I find. Again, this woman carried out a terrorist attack in Pakistan that killed 2 Chinese teachers, teaching people to speak Chinese as a second language, and a driver. And this person, Taha Siddiqui, journalist who's been published in the New York Times, in The Guardian, in Al Jazeera, does this whole thread invoking this kind of revolutionary rhetoric around this woman that carried out this terrorist attack against civilians. Sometimes you have to pick up the gun to put the gun down, Malcolm X. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable, John F. Kennedy. See, people in power understand exactly one thing: violence, Noam Chomsky. Revolution is not a dinner party, or writing essay, or painting picture, or doing embroidery. It can't be... This is especially sick, too, using this Mao quote. It can't be so refined, so temperate, kind, courteous, restrained, and magnanimous. A revolution is insurrection, an act of violence, by which one class overthrows another, from Mao Zedong. The state calls its own violence law, but that of the individual, crime. Max Stirner. Like, if you're gonna have this energy... Like, I would like to see the reaction for someone to glorify someone who, like a journalist, to glorify someone like this that killed American troops in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or Libya or wherever. I think the reaction would probably be a little bit different. And not even troops, like this is civilians. So someone praising someone who carried out a terrorist attack under this like American occupation that killed a couple teachers and a cab driver. Civilians. I'm sure the Imran Khan stuff has nothing to do with this, by the way. I mean, it's the kind of thing that even though I think it's important to pump the brakes a little bit on some of that talk. It does fit into that pattern. Yeah, remember Omar Kadir? I mean, Omar Kadir is the ultimate example of this. Who's a kid, who's a literal child, who was accused of throwing a grenade while the country that he was in was invaded by armed men. They were invading the country, bombing the country. and was accused of throwing a grenade during a battle that was happening in this country that we were invading, and was then sent to Guantanamo with no trial for many years, was tortured by America. And the idea of showing this guy any sympathy or compassion whatsoever was like completely, you were framed as like an absolute radical, anti-American, anti-Canadian radical for suggesting that this guy was anything other than this like depraved monster. Is an actual child. So I think this is really alarming, though. This someone that's been that's like an actual journalist from Western sources, openly praising a woman who carried out a terrorist attack against civilians, teachers, and a cab driver, and suggesting that this is somehow this like righteous revolutionary act. I think that's pretty. It's sick, and I think it's a really alarming trend, also. This is the teaching is cultural imperialism take. Oh, good. The presence of Chinese nationals in Balochistan is neither unpolitical nor a coincidence. Before the Soviets sent their tanks to Afghanistan, they sent teachers and scientists. It's a form of dominance. Knowledge is not neutral, it's the manifestation of cultural hegemony. This is also referred to as cultural imperialism. I don't know, folks. Again, it's a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, of like the power, the nature of power, and like what imperialism is about. And the way this kind of like the language of the left, the language of the anti-imperialist left being used to justify terrorist attacks against civilians, against an official enemy country of the United States. That is, I think, that's really fucking alarming. The Cubans send the doctors as spies. That's right. Anarchist or neoliberal, I really can't tell. Well, that's the thing. There's becoming very little actual difference in terms of the ultimate. It's again, like with many things, it's just a difference of rhetoric. The rhetoric is the only thing that's maybe different. This story was huge in the EU for like 2 days that it got memory hold hard. Macedonia faked militant raid. Macedonia officials have admitted that 7 alleged Pakistani militants killed in March 2002 were in fact illegal immigrants shot in cold blood to impress the international community. Yeah. Jesus. This is like, I think this is ultimately where a lot of this is going, though. This using this left language to talk about what China is doing rather than what America is doing, or to liken them as being kind of more or less the same thing, or equally as bad as one another. I think ultimately this is where this is going. Like I mentioned, the Xinjiang and the Uyghur situation, and the sort of the effort that they've made to tamp down on like this kind of radicalism and extremism that was leading to terrorist attacks in that part of the world. I think this is the kind of result, though, is that the idea is like if we ever see a similar incident in like Urumqi, for example, or like any one of these places, if we saw a terrorist attack there now, like what was going on 10 years ago, where there was rioting, there was people primarily against Uyghur people, right? There is these incidents of terrorism. If we see an uptick in that kind of violence, we're going to have this entire cottage industry already established in the West to frame any response to that as being like illegitimate, and to frame the violence itself as being like righteous and as an act of like anti-colonialism. Even if this is being done by extreme reactionary forces within these societies, or reactionary forces that have ties to the CIA and to the Western military establishment. We're going to see if that kind of thing did happen, if we did see another uptick of violence in that kind of region, there's going to be this entire group here in the West that are going to be more than willing to justify that kind of violence, regardless of who it's affecting, whether it's affecting like actual Chinese people, or like the people connected to the state, or whether it's just affecting civilians, as it was, in the 10 years previously. There's a lot of people, I think, more than willing now, that have kind of laid this ideological groundwork to say that that's like, that it's okay, that it's like anti-colonialist, and that we should support it, regardless of how reactionary the people that are carrying out this violence are, or regardless of the shady ties that they have to the West, who are arming and training them just as they've armed and trained reactionary seditionists in other societies that they don't like, for now the better part of a century. I kind of feel like that's where this is going. Does that make sense? Al-Qaeda is on our side in this conflict. I mean, we've already had that. We already had that in Syria, right? We already have people doing that. And like laundering that kind of extremism and being like, well, they're fighting someone that we don't like, so they're good, actually. That's kind of the end result of where this kind of anti-China campaign is going. Like if and when, and there has been attacks on like ethnically Russian people during this conflict, do people like hold them up as being victims of this war? Of course they don't. They're like people that are openly celebrating over this kind of thing. There's people making excuses for the kind of like images of like torture and fucked up things that we've seen going around, of people being tied to poles and beaten and sexually assaulted. There's people being like, oh no, actually that's okay because it's happening to Russia supporters, so it's fine. This is anarchism as marketing pro-US positions. I mean, that's a lot of the time when we talk about foreign policy with these folks, that's what it ends up being. Like the person that was we were talking about North Korea yesterday, and the person that was in here saying like, no, North Korea is bad and terrible, and the Kim family is evil and terrible, and we can never support them. But yeah, of course you got to lift the sanctions. Of course you got to lift the blockades. Yes, I'm trying to explain the context of the war and why they've developed like that, why their society has developed like that under that kind of threat. And they're like, yes, but still they're bad and terrible, and we can't trust them, and they're barbaric. And so it's like, yes, I understand all these historical contexts. I understand all this nuance. Yes, but the end result, though, is ultimately the same. We had a couple of DPRK haters around here, bigger wig. So, like, speaking of, that's a good way to get into this post that Old Dutch sent, which, again, I think this is amazing that CTV News is even writing this. Like, I find it very surprising. Like, I'm sure there's all kinds of people accusing them of doing Putin propaganda, or Russian disinformation. With mounting evidence that Canada trained Ukrainian extremists, experts say government needs to be held to account. I'm very surprised that they're writing about this. with mounting evidence pointing to the Canadian Armed Forces having trained members of Ukraine's military who are also reported to be part of extremist groups. Experts say Ottawa needs to strongly bolster its investigation. I'm sure they're going to get right on that. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to be all over that any moment now. Experts say Ottawa needs to strongly bolster its investigation and vetting of the soldiers it trains and arms in the embattled country. I'm sure they're going to get right on that, yeah. The Department of National Defence promised a thorough review of Canada's mission in Ukraine after CTVnews.ca approached them for comment in October 21 regarding a report from George Washington University that found extremists in the Ukrainian military were bragging about being trained by Canadians as part of Operation Unifier. Amazing. They promised a very thorough review way back in October 21. I'm sure they're going to get on that review any moment now. The group in question, which calls itself Military Order Centuria or simply Centuria, has links to the far-right Azov movement, which also shows again that when you talk about these far-right militias in Ukraine, people just write out, Azov battalion is like a few hundred guys, a few thousand guys. Who even cares? But it's not just Azov battalion. That's one element of this that has far-reaching tendrils all over the place, embedded into the very political establishment. Still haven't seen the word Nazi. It's true. The Canadian military said they were alarmed by the report and denied any knowledge that extremists had taken part in training, adding that it does not have the mandate to screen the soldiers they train from other countries. In the month that followed, an investigation by the Ottawa Citizen found that not only did Canadian officials meet and get briefed by leaders from the Azov battalion in 2018, they did not denounce the unit's neo-Nazi beliefs, despite being warned about their views by their colleagues and their main concern was that media would expose that the meeting had taken place. Officers and diplomats allowed themselves to be photographed with battalion officials, which was then used online by Azov as propaganda. The federal government, which has spent more than $890 million. That's the Canadian government, remember, we're talking about. The federal government, which has spent more than $890 million training Ukrainian forces through Operation Unifier, has repeatedly stressed that it has not and will not ever train soldiers affiliated with Azov. But when Azov is incorporated officially into the military establishment, what fucking difference is if you're just, we're training the military guys that aren't connected to them. They're all connected. They're officially part of the establishment. So anyone that's connected to the military establishment is connected to it. I can't believe David Pugliese hasn't been sacked yet. And I'm honestly very surprised to see this appearing at all. But as we'll see the actual response from people, you can have these reports coming out as long as you have a well-trained populace that's designed to immediately dismiss stories like this right away and to shout down the people that are writing these stories. When you've got a well-trained population that knows exactly what the story of the conflict is, and any deviation of that is wrong and bad. When you have a well-trained population, you can put out stories like that, and you don't even have to worry about it causing a stir because you've got people in the audience immediately denouncing the people that are writing it of their own volition. Dental care, please. Amazing. However, a recent investigation by Radio Canada into documents related to Canada's mission in Ukraine found evidence that soldiers from the Azov regiment identified by patches on their clothing and other insignias have participated in training with the Canadian Armed Forces as recently as 2020 at the Western-backed Zolokiv Training Center in Western Ukraine. And here's another question. Right? Here's another question. How can you say, someone answer this question, please. When you have this being reported out, by reputable official Western sources who are generally pretty on board with the State Department narrative, but you have the infiltration of these fascists into their military being reported out extensively in the West. You've got the West deliberately arming and training these groups being reported out in official sources in the West. Knowing that, how, when Vladimir Putin says there's a threat to our country because of these far-right militias and we're engaging in a process to fight back against these extremist militias that are being armed and trained in order to fight us. And they say that, and then they start this war for that reason. How can we then say that's disinformation? How is that disinformation? Again, whether you agree, whether you want to take them totally seriously or not, or say like, though that's the 100% they're being altruistic. You don't have to agree with every single thing that they say or believe every single thing that they say. Regardless, though, when we know about this issue, that the West has been arming and training these far-right extremists, has been reported extensively in the West, how is it disinformation to talk about this and to say like, well, Russia is saying there's this denazification process. There's clear evidence reported out that this issue exists. So how is that disinformation? Whether you agree with them or not, or whether you think that they're using this as a pretense for these much less altruistic reasons, whether you don't have to agree, but how is it disinformation to say that they're going after the main cause of this, their main source of concern is this Nazified government that's funded and backed by the West? It feels like that's a fairly legitimate concern based on this very real reporting that's happening in Western media. This is the question. And of course, the Canadian state said, we're going to have an investigation on this. Oh, any moment now. We promise we're going to have a thorough investigation. Of course, they knew. You know, the idea, we never met with these Azov guys. We had no idea this was going on. Yeah, they know what's going on. Yes, they're deliberately training these guys. Yes. It's part of a long trend. This is not the first time this shit has happened. This has happened dozens of times over the last several decades that we know about. The idea that this is some big mistake, that they're going to do an investigation and figure out what went wrong. It's literally this is the point, is training these guys and arming them. Are you lying now or were you lying then? Yes. And they are lying now. Of course they're lying. So I genuinely don't get this. How people that are going online and saying Russia is invading this country because they feel like they're under threat by this country that's been armed and funded by the West, that has armed and trained these fascist militias in the West specifically to fight us. And that's what this conflict is about. And that's disinformation? Like the fucking CTV News is not the Kremlin. It's not RT. It's not the Kremlin. I'm sure they're going to be accused of being the Kremlin propaganda outlet. But they're not. That's a genuine official Western source. This is why we heavily dose our kids with propaganda. Western power is good. Communism, socialism bad. Hence China and Russia bad. Anything we say about Russia and socialists is true. The Ukrainian army wouldn't fire on civilians in Donbass, so they had to recruit literal Nazis, cartoonishly evil. And again, there's been reporting, not reporting in the gray zone or not reporting in RT, but reporting in CTV News, the Ottawa Citizen, in Yahoo News from a few weeks ago, how the CIA was training some of these groups to engage in terrorism in the event of a Russian invasion. And once again, they have a long history of arming and training extremists to carry out acts of terrorism in order to destabilize their enemy. There's many dozens of examples of this. And now, when we wonder whether that exact thing is happening at this exact moment, that is Russian disinformation. None of this makes sense. It doesn't make sense. Because that's what this Daily Beast thing is about. And by the way, here's the response to this piece before we get to, we can get to the Daily Beast thing after. Here's the response to this piece. This is what I mean. This is where the propaganda comes in. Because you can have now stories about how Canada has armed and trained these militias, which I'm sorry is a somewhat legitimate reason. That's a legitimate security threat. This thing that we know was happening, whether you like it or not, that's a legitimate security threat. This is what I was saying before this invasion started, which made so many people angry. But it's the truth. When the West is arming and training fascist militias to kill Russians, from their perspective, that is a legitimate security threat to their country. That shouldn't be controversial to say. But, like I said, we can have pieces like this that publish this, and because we have this now well-trained populace that's completely unwilling to accept this viewpoint whatsoever, or to think that anything outside this narrative is propaganda, you have responses like the ones in this thread. You know, this is the same battalion holding firm at the steel factory in Mariupol. An analyst on CNN was comparing them to the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. Just saying, and not defending the unit as they fight for survival. Sir, Joel, you are defending them. You're literally you're comparing them to like brave Spartans, fighting the odds, holding the steel factory against the evil Russians. That's defending them. Just saying and not defending the unit as they fight for the survival. Yes, you are, sir. Again, and with a Ukrainian flag in the bio. We train Canadian extremists within the CAF as well. Hand wave that away also. Both our armies should do much more to root out extremism. But, the big but there. Very big but. But, while it's problematic, some extremists from Azov got training via Unifier. They're also part of Ukraine's line of defense against Russia's genocidal invasion. So there's a lot of people saying, like, I'm not defending them, but, and then going on to defend them. Right? Oh, it is historian Matt. I did get into it with this guy, didn't I? You know what I mean? There's a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not defending these Nazis, but, and then just immediately defending them. And all these obnoxious assholes acting like being suspicious of accusations of war crimes is being a genocide denier, and patently absurd to even suggest when Azov and friends are literally well known for using false flag terrorist attacks with no concern for killing civilians throughout Maidan and afterwards. And it's not just Azov. It's groups that are armed and trained by the CIA, which we know has been happening here. Right? It's not just Azov doing that. It's because the CIA trains extremist groups to do exactly that. That's exactly why I'm suspicious about these stories that come out where not only is like their confusion about a certain event that's happening, but all the information coming out about it is coming from these Azov guys. It's literally coming from their own propaganda. And that's the information we're using to base our entire understanding of these incidents on. And these people carrying out terrorist attacks and deliberately lying about it is part of the training that they get from the West, including the CIA and the Canadian military establishment, who we also know have been training these people. It's a good thing like stuff like Spartans aren't kind of a fascist dog whistle. That may be concerning. Yeah, seriously. The whole genocide thing spread fast as well. Well, that's what I'm saying now. And like I said yesterday, I talked a little bit about Xinjiang as well. Canada absolutely loves to declare genocides are going on in all kinds of places except our own country, our allies' countries, conveniently. We really love declaring genocides are happening. But when someone points out that there's a genocide happening in this country that we live in currently, that is actually not something that we need to take so seriously. And that's something that we have to like lower flags about for a couple of weeks and then just move on with our lives. That's the best we can do about that. But we're really more than willing to declare genocides in all these other places, but also arm and fund these brave resistance groups to fight back against this genocide that's occurring. Not in Palestine, though, of course. Can't arm the Palestinians. We can't send Stinger missiles to the Palestinians because that would be anti-Semitic to do that. Let's go back to this thread here. This person. So this is in response to a story about Canada training extremist groups. No matter the cost, no matter what roadblocks Russia tries to put up, there can be no excuses. Canada must do whatever it takes to support Ukraine. Nothing is off the table. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian people as they fight for their country. So that's the ultimate. What that means is, yes, we should be indeed continuing to arm and fund these fascists. A couple of brave truth heroes in the chat or in the replies. Anyway, so a whole lot of normalization of fascism. You have a whole many people in our populations that are like have totally gotten on board with normalizing this kind of thing. Not only the normalization of fascism that's happening right now, but this disinformation push and this push to put everyone under this umbrella, anyone that steps outside of this Western narrative, put anyone that does this under this umbrella of weaponized Russian disinformation. It almost feels like these articles are designed to make liberals more reactionary by defending the Ukraine flag on their suburban mailbox at all costs. Well, so, I mean, it's the mask getting kind of ripped off. And people are like, oh yeah, no, actually I'm quite comfortable with this. This kind of stuff makes you want to hole up in a hole and watch Uzbek Tandoor videos. That sounds nice. My link shows that a lot of the people we say we should arm work for weapons contractors, and MSM never discloses this. Of course not. Having a war is genocide, says country with natives in... It says country with Native Americans living in camps. Yeah, or indigenous people here as well. Obviously. Very messed up. And where's this we'll look at this Daily Beast piece. This is an entire hour-long broadcast from Danny there. Maybe I should get Danny back on the show. We get Danny Haifong back. I did reach out to Jing Li as well about getting her on. We'll see how that goes. So the Daily Beast has attacked me and several others, including Jing Li, Ben Norton, Max Blumenthal, and Lee Camp. After a litany of McCarthyist smears, the Daily Beast admits to going directly to social media and Patreon, advocating for a removal from these platforms. And again, I hate this shit so much. I absolutely hate this stuff. It's just snitching. It's literally snitching. It's going online and finding people that are presenting a viewpoint that you don't like and trying to get them, cut them off from getting any income whatsoever, and snitching to their social media platforms to remove them because they're presenting an alternative, a viewpoint that you don't happen to agree with. And it's all being done under the guise of this because, of course, people that write these pieces would say that they're the biggest free speech defenders. But they've have this active like double think now, where now this is all being done under the guise of disinformation. That's how you can make people say this idea of disinformation is the way that you can make people simultaneously believe in free speech and censorship. You know, it's like, yeah, of course I believe in free speech unless it falls under the guise of this disinformation, which is this like really terrible, ongoing, weaponized problem that other countries are using to it. It's like a national security threat, and we have to be really attuned to that. and ensure that we're not being victims of these kind of disinformation campaigns.
This is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hey, Antifada, thanks for the raid. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Antifada, welcome. Love the Antifada podcast. Bring it on in. We're talking about we're talking to the disinformation cops. We're talking about the disinformation police and how this idea that disinformation is the thing that's like allowing people to walk this rhetorical line between saying they believe in free speech unless it falls under this umbrella of disinformation, which is when we have to, ensure that this none of this is allowed to ever be propagated because it's like this national security threat. And also kind of an important disclaimer. When we do talk about disinformation, my brother got disinformed once and it turned him into a newt. Never underestimate it. He got better. When it comes to disinformation, two things can be true, okay? And I want to be very clear about this. Two things can be true. One is that this idea, there's something to the idea of the dangers of misinformation. There is indeed dangerous misinformation that is being propagated for a lot of kind of nefarious reasons by a lot of nefarious people. We saw a lot of disinformation, like weaponized disinformation throughout this COVID pandemic, which is literally dangerous. It's literally threatening to people. Got millions of people hooked onto these like wacko cures like ivermectin or whatever, or chugging mercury or whatever these guys are doing. Right-wing disinformation, I think, is a really bad thing, a bad and dangerous thing. Disinformation about immigrants or refugees and their links to terrorism or extremism, these things get people killed. They lead to mass shootings. They lead to stochastic terrorism. This kind of stuff is really bad. I've talked about this a lot. The right-wing pipeline on social media that was funneling people into these like right-wing extremist camps. It is a serious issue. And I don't want to downplay that disinformation is a real thing that does exist. That is a dangerous thing. The problem here, though, the problem with what is happening is this very real concept of disinformation is being shifted and warped to encompass not only that kind of dangerous, harmful misinformation that we're describing, but also when it comes to these foreign policy issues, anything that falls outside the like Western consensus. And they're trying to now create these real institutions to fight disinformation, which again is a real thing, but which is ultimately being wielded by people who have an ideology and who are going to use this concept to delegitimize any information that runs contrary to Western interests. That's the kind of dangerous thing. GMO Radio, thank you for gifting a sub also. Yeah, the disinformation campaign being conducted against Corbyn by the British establishment. This is the primary thing, is that the people that are now organizing these institutions to combat disinformation are the primary purveyors of information, right? Of disinformation. They're the primary purveyors of disinformation. Mainstream media and the government, whether it's Canada or the United States or anywhere else in the West, these are the primary purveyors of misinformation. The relentless media campaign against Corbyn, I think, is a great example of that. The Iraq invasion. We see media in the West working in tandem with the government and the military-industrial complex to produce mass amounts of disinformation. We've seen insane amounts of disinformation just through this Ukraine conflict. Pro-Ukrainian disinformation, which the disinformation police say is actually okay and good. Barack Obama, right? That's the question I asked on Twitter the other day. Like under the Obama administration, when they retroactively declared any military-aged male killed in the vicinity of a drone strike, when they retroactively declared those people to be enemy combatants in order to make sure that their civilian casualty numbers were as low as possible and to inflate the actual numbers of supposed bad guys that they were taking care of with this unaccountable drone program, carrying out these like completely warrantless assassinations in countries where they were not even at war. Was that disinformation? Was it disinformation to lie and obfuscate about who the victims of these drone strikes were? Yeah, I would say it wasn't. That's mass murder we're talking about. Right? We're talking about covering up mass murder. These are the very people that are now wielding this power that they have to determine what is and is not disinformation and what the consequences need to be for sharing disinformation. And that's the thing. People need to understand how dangerous that situation is and how bad that can possibly get.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
It's a special operation when the U.S. drones a wedding, exactly. But suggesting that or just repeating that that's what Russia says about what they're doing right now, that's disinformation. Tool using Mammal, thank you for the 200 friend coin. Thank you very much. I heard that Corbyn was anti-Semitic, but I'm so skeptical of Western media, I'm almost certain that isn't true. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn was a threat to the establishment in the UK because he held genuine, anti-imperialist views. They can't having anyone that has Jeremy Corbyn's views coming close to actually wielding the levers of power. That's not an acceptable outcome. And there was a dedicated, nonstop propaganda, media onslaught against Corbyn for 5 straight years to ensure that people, this guy that had campaigned for peace and against conflict and against capitalism and against imperialism and in support of marginalized people for his entire career up to that point, there was this mass media campaign, absolutely relentless, for 5 years to convince people that he was this dangerous, terrorist-loving, anti-Semitic dictator in waiting, basically. And many, many people did believe this. And not only did many people believe it, but many people in the compatible left, while tried to ostensibly walk this line between supporting Corbyn, but also giving credence to a lot of these attacks. Right? Which is, I think, a lesson that people should learn from that. That you gain nothing by trying to argue with people on these grounds and saying, yes, of course this problem exists, but they lost. Anyone in the Labour Party or the British left that started those arguments in that way lost right away by giving any credence to it whatsoever, because they don't want to be accused, like others, they don't want to be accused themselves of being anti-Semitic or being terrorist sympathizers or whatever the smear is. So people would say, oh no, of course what you're saying is bad, and yes, we agree that it's a horrible crisis and we need to fix it, but they've lost. They lost by not just utterly 100% rejecting, just completely rejecting the entire premise. That's, I think, the lesson that people should have learned. I don't think it's the lesson people did learn. He was his own worst enemy in that respect. Well, that's the thing. He's nice. He's nice, Dave. And it's like he didn't want to be accused of being, like any normal person, I'm sure did not enjoy being constantly accused of being an anti-Semite, which is a horrible smear, or being a terrorist sympathizer or whatever. And he thought that people in his own party were actually serious about fighting anti-Semitism or in any way. And he wanted to defend himself against these attacks. And he's just too nice. Rather than just discrediting it, he wanted to play ball. He thought people were being fair. He thought he was he thought he was dealing with people that had this kind of some kind of principle or moral stance. And that if he could display to them his contrition for contributing to any of the terrible crisis, then he would be able to kind of get them on board with his ideas. But of course, he did the exact same thing. There was never enough. He couldn't apologize enough. There was nothing he could have done to get people to say, okay, well, he seems sorry, so let's just move on and talk about the issues. Literally, it was never going to go away. And it only got worse and worse the more that they realized that it was an issue that people were responding to. That's certainly the lesson that I learned out of watching that take place, is just to never, don't give these smears or attacks any credence whatsoever. If you even acknowledge them, full-throated denial, and that's the way forward. And and trying to play ball with these people is just a losing game because they're not interested in having a moral debate. It was never a moral debate. It was about destroying him, and that's all it was about. And I think anyone that rises to any position of prominence in the left at all, that comes anywhere close to touching the levers of power like this, like Corbyn did or like Bernie did, has to have this understanding that these smears are happening not in an effort to like have some kind of good faith self-criticism or some good faith effort to improve things, but is purely a malicious attempt to destroy everything you're doing and to just treat it as hostile like that from moment one. My only criticism of Corbyn is that he remained in the Labour Party until they kicked him out unceremoniously. I mean, that's, I think, one of the issues here with the left in the UK or in Canada. We still have this idea that, like, you know, we just need to stay in the NDP. We just need to stay in the Labour Party. Yes, there's an establishment there that's totally hostile to us. Like, they acknowledge this, right? We acknowledge that there's this ruling class in place that's 100% opposed to us. There's this establishment within these big parties that are like completely opposed to everything we stand for. But if we just keep staying in the party, keep organizing, keep voting, eventually we're going to take over. And that's just the thing. I don't think that's ever, I think it's just a losing game. It's a dead end. It's a complete dead end. And Corbyn did manage to take over the Labour Party. And I think the only thing that he could have done would be, as much as he got accused of doing like Stalinist purges, he didn't at all. He worked with the very people that hated him and were trying to undermine him from the first moment. He openly worked with them, and he needed to say right away, day one, purged, you're gone. Anyone that was against me, that was trying to undermine what I'm doing, out, gone. And of course they would have cried and gone, oh, he's purging, he's doing this. And the answer to that has to be yes, I'm purging. You're purged. You're purged, sir. We need more of these Stalinist purges. Absolutely. We do. Purge the records day one. Day one. That's what Starmer did. They don't care. They'll do the same the moment they get the opportunity. And all the crying, all the theatrics, it's just that. It's just pretend. It's all just theatrics. And we have to stop falling for that if we ever even have an opportunity to take over any of these bourgeois parties. It is cry bully shit. Purge these folks. Purge them. If God willing, some leftist manages to almost take over the Labour Party again or become win the leadership of one of these bourgeois parties, day one, purge. All the fucking, all the bureaucrats, the neoliberals, the social democrats, anyone that's not on board, enthusiastically, out. You're gone. Day one. See, the Corbyn thing does make a case for potentially taking Labour back, provided that, yes, you're just immediately having every Blairite permanently expelled on day one. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's still going to be a possibility. But again, I get discouraged by... I just feel like the same thing's going to happen for the people that like are still NDP dead enders in Canada. I just feel like the same thing's going to happen. If the day comes that they're like the dog that catches the car and they finally do overtake the NDP, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be like, oh, well, we don't want to be mean. We don't want to be too mean here, so we're going to make sure we work together and we're going to bring everyone together so we can fight the other guys we don't like. And it's going to be like, that's going to be the same result. Yeah, did you support the invasion of Iraq? Gone. Purged. Left authoritarianism is when you stand up to the giant screaming toddlers that run our society. Yes, which is an inherently good thing to do that we should support. Yes, meaner. Absolutely. Meaner to the reactionary forces that are trying to undermine us and stop us. Let's recognize who those folks are. And yeah, when we get the opportunity, let's be mean as fuck to them. Yeah, I'm on board. I mean, if whether you think electoralism in kind of these Western liberal democracies is a dead end or not, for anyone that wants to stay in that world, that's got to be the lesson. You treat these people, even people that are ostensibly in the same party, treat them as hostile if that's what they are. And don't fall for this game of like, oh, you're so mean and authoritarian. Oh my goodness. Oh. Just don't fall for that. And just say, yes, I am. Goodbye. R.I.P. Bozo. That's got to be the mindset. And yeah, Sam the Nanner Man, this is a great quote. I think this is the ultimate takeaway. And like, I don't know Vincent Bevins. I don't know much about him like politically. I don't know if he's a communist or what kind of leftist he is. You know, I think he obviously has left-wing views. I think you can take that away from the Jakarta method. This seems to me the ultimate lesson of the book, though. And it's not even that Bevins himself is coming to that lesson. It's just the kind of inevitable lesson that rises to the top from seeing these historical forces at play and from hearing the people that were part of these movements, hearing their conclusions. And this is a really important quote. Most of the people I spoke with who were politically involved back then believed fervently in a nonviolent approach in gradual, peaceful democratic change. They often had no love for the system set up by people like Mao, but they knew that their side had lost the debate because so many of their friends were dead. They often admitted, without hesitation or pleasure, that the hardliners had been right. Aidit's party, unarmed party, didn't survive. Allende's democratic socialism was not allowed, regardless of the détente between Soviets and Washington. Looking at it this way, the major losers of the 20th century were those who believed too sincerely in the essence of a liberal international order. Those who trusted too much in democracy or too much in what the United States said it supported rather than what it really supported. What the rich countries said rather than what they did, that group was annihilated. Amazing quote from the book that I think is just the unavoidable conclusion. Right? It's having faith in this idea that ultimately liberal democracy is good and stands for good things. That's the first lie, that like everything is built on that. And if you believe that lie, you'll believe anything else that comes along after, or you'll support whatever comes along after. If you understand that that is a lie, then everything kind of clicks into place, and you understand how all these institutions really work. Patrice Lumumba wasn't even a hardline socialist and they murdered him. JFK was a conservative and they murdered him. Yeah. Simple as that. You know, throughout that whole period, that especially between like the 50s and 80s, not that that stuff didn't continue after, but that whole kind of like post-colonial period just took out anyone that was a threat to their way of doing things. We're talking about an empire with a first strike policy that's been waging a genocidal counter-revolution using laundered drug money for 80 years. What peaceful transition could possibly happen here? Yeah, exactly. And that's it's understanding as well that people, regardless of what their ideology is, if they're part of that like liberal ruling order, even if they say good things or act like they're progressive or altruistic, ultimately they're still supporting that status quo and upholding that status quo and ensuring that continues indefinitely, that process of exploitation. You gotta purge people, folks. More purges. It's not even just more purges too, but it's understanding these smears and not allowing these smears. There's a way, I think, of confronting these things where these smears can just not have the same effect. And like I was saying, even if you're trying to be nice, and even if you're trying to pretend that the people that are engaging in these smear campaigns are actually interested or operating in good faith, if you just jettison that whole idea, then you won't give them any ammunition. Because believe me, anyone that gets anywhere near touching the levers of power on the left, whether it's in Canada, if this fucking day, one day comes in this country, which I'm still extremely skeptical about, if anyone even remotely on the left comes close to touching power in this country, or the United States, or the UK, or wherever else, they're going to say they're going to find something that sticks. There's going to be something that's not based in political, that's not based in ideas, but that's based in this pure bullshit's reactionary smear stuff. Well, we saw the anti-Semitism stuff, we saw the sexism stuff with Bernie and with Corbyn. There's always going to be something. There's going to, for the next person, the next man or woman or non-binary person that steps to the plate and actually gets close to building a coalition that threatens power in any way, they're going to be saying whatever else about that person as well. And at that time, the supporters of that person are going to have to decide, do we engage engage with the people that are making these smears, engage with them in good faith, or do we just view them as enemies that are trying to destroy us and just walk over them? And then take anyone in our party that's trying to undermine us and just marginalize them immediately. That's got to be the only way to do things, or else nothing is ever going to happen. Just say no. Just say, I don't believe you. You just say you're lying. But that ties together with this disinformation stuff as well, because if these things can be successfully tied to this idea of disinformation, then you have a official sort of method in place of removing people that just step out of line, because then it qualifies under this disinformation umbrella. And this Ukraine war proves that when push comes to shove, libs are the most bloodthirsty people on the planet, despite their flowery, means-tested rhetoric. Really important lesson about all this, isn't it? Really important lesson. These people are openly defending and supporting Nazis. That's pretty. How has that escalated just over the last 2 months? You have these people openly rehabilitating Nazis, actual Nazis, like Michael McPhail was doing on Rachel Maddow. Or you have people openly defending these Nazi militias in Ukraine. And literally saying, oh, I'm not defending them, and then defending them. And they're ramping up the double genocide rhetoric. Yeah, seriously. So here's this thing with Danny Haifong. The Daily Beast has attacked me and several others, including Jing Lee, Benjamin Norton, Max Blumenthal, and Lee Camp. After a litany of McCarthyist smears, the Daily Beast admits to going directly to social media and Patreon advocating for our removal from these platforms. When confronted with videos from Haifong and Camp's channel, YouTube said they do not violate their policies. In general, we've established policies that prohibit content inciting violence or promoting hatred, including against the Uyghur people. Additionally, as we've shared, our teams are working quickly to remove violative content related to the war in Ukraine, as we've removed more than 1,200 channels and more than 30,000 videos for violating our policies. Meta claimed it is taking active measures against disinformation. We take extensive steps to combat misinformation using a wide range of tools, including our industry-leading network of more than 80 independent partners who fact-check claims across the globe. And again, we're looking into the nonpartisan organizations that are engaging in this kind of fact-checking. And who's funding them? Well, it's George Soros and Pierre Oligomar, and these neoliberal capitalists that have a specific ideological agenda. We also label media outlets that are wholly or partially under the editorial control of their government to help people better understand the sources of news content they see and prevent advertisers who repeatedly post misinformation or otherwise break our rules from running ads on our platform. Twitter claimed the platform has increased the labeling of accounts as Chinese, Belarusian, or Russian state-funded media, deleted bad actors, curated reliable information in Twitter Moments, and monitors for dishonest, and which is all, of course, curated by Western media, who are as we've said many times, the ultimate purveyors of misinformation. and monitors for dishonest narratives, among other actions. Patreon said in seeking a balance between free expression and safety, the platform only takes action on accounts when misinformation demonstrates an immediate capacity to hurt people. They specifically named COVID-19 and QAnon disinformation in light of this, but did not say this policy applies to dishonesty around Ukraine or Xinjiang denialism. Xinjiang denialism. Like, remember that AP article? Remember the AP article from a few months ago? Remember where they went to Xinjiang and they're like, yeah, it looks like a lot of these facilities are closed. We don't really know what's going on. And totally walking back a lot of the extreme claims. And now they still have people talking about engaging in Xinjiang denialism and how that's misinformation. When all of the people that are doing the research into what is going on in Xinjiang, also not non-partisan, non-ideological, people with direct connections to things like the Victims of Communism Foundation and these Western think tanks backed by the arms manufacturing industry. That's where the information from what is going on in Xinjiang is coming. And people that are saying, no, I don't agree with that, are engaging in Xinjiang denialism. So here's Danny. Here's the questions they were asking him. You seem to have a good following on Patreon, which you're trying to further build. How much money do you make on it per month? And is your primary source of income? At $10 a month and over 400 patrons, you're making over $4,000 a month. In one of your pieces you wrote, believe it or not, the writer has been asked on more than a few occasions about why I write when there's more urgent political work to attend to. The question assumes that the creation and dissemination of political propaganda is secondary to other forms of political activity. Such an assumption has no basis in material reality. The truth is that all forms of political struggle are equally necessary to accomplish the daunting objective of social transformation. No further explanation should be required. Do you see yourself as a journalist or a political propagandist? Reading your writings and social media posts indicates to me you're firmly taking the Russian side in regard to the war in Ukraine. Why side? This is a journalist writing this. This is a journalist writing this, by the way, to talk about this story in the Daily Beast. Why side with the right-wing, fascistic, capitalist government as an avowed leftist? Do you believe that larger nations have a right to invade smaller, weaker nations to maintain buffer zones and or spheres of influence? And how do you square that with being an anti-imperialist? Is your support for Russia simply a rejection of NATO / the USA on your part? So just some objective reporting from a Matthew journalist. I don't think that's his name, no. Zelensky was not installed by Maidan. Why do you keep calling him the coup government? Is your contention all post-Maidan Ukrainian governments are illegitimate until one aligns with Russia? You also called the Zelensky government far-right when his party is centrist. Why spread misinformation? Your tweets on biolabs seem to indicate you believe the U.S. is making biological weapons in country. This has been roundly debunked. Why spread misinformation? Who's it been debunked by? I don't know. You claim the pre-2022... Like, this is a fucking journalist. He's just repeating talking points. He's just repeating Western talking points. This is amazing. You claim the pre-2022 war in Donbass as justification for the Russian invasion. Why wait 8 years to invade if it was so urgent? And why launch an invasion of the whole country that in the span of a month has already killed thousands of people? Is that not making the situation worse? You called Russia provoked and targeted. Is Russia the victim in this war? And do any of the Russian claims of provocation rise to the legal and moral level of justifying a full-scale war? You claim that Ukrainian military is, quote, full of Nazis, but Azov is only around 1,000 strong, if that, and the Ukrainian military has hundreds of thousands of, I can't see the word. Again, why spread misinformation? There's that word again, misinformation. By claiming the military is full of Nazis, but Azov is only 1,000 people. Like, this is what we've heard time and time again. This is a fucking journalist asking these questions. You have repeatedly claimed that Russia is not an imperialist power despite recent wars in Georgia, Ukraine, and Syria, and the fact that it is a major player in the international oil market and one of the world's great military powers. Even if it doesn't have the greatest financial power, similarly, I gather in historical terms to Italy when it invaded Ethiopia. Is this war not evidence that Russia is engaged in imperialism? Now, as a leftist anti-imperialist, can you support imperialism? There's the watering down of what these words mean and what these concepts are. Again. Does Friends of Socialist China receive funding from the Chinese government? Do you? Ben Norton, Jingjing Li, and yourself are all signatories of the statement opposing the propaganda war on China. I see that you all frequently interview each other, appear on each other's platforms. Is your collaboration a formal agreement? Is there coordination by CGTN, both given to you and Jingjing are giving a platform there? I never see you tell their audience that you're shared signatories to an ideological statement. Do you believe that to be journalistically ethical? This motherfucker's asking about journalistic ethics. Jesus Christ. Said statement references the widespread oppression and mass incarceration of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang as terrible slanders and unsubstantiated allegations. This is in spite of widely available evidence to the contrary. Who supplied the evidence again? Yeah, don't worry about that. You feel the need to deny atrocities committed by China as part of your advocacy of a multipolar world. Is there any circumstance where you would criticize China for human rights abuses? Isn't it Islamophobic and dismissive of the victims to deny their oppression even exists? Given your in a tweet, you mentioned in a tweet, I can't read the word. Yeah, in a tweet, you're a big fan of RT, Sputnik, CGTN, and a few others. Why support state-run outlets and authoritarian states rather than independent media outlets outside of the corporate press? It's very rich, this guy who's just engaging in this, basically a bullet point list of Western talking points, and then suggesting that state media is bad and independent media is good. You've defended multiple authoritarian governments, including the CCP, Putin's Russia, and Syria's Assad. Is it safe to say you have no problem with authoritarianism and that you believe socialism requires it? This is the non-ideological, independent Western press. I'm going to have Danny back on the show. I really enjoyed doing my interview with Danny. Good guy. I enjoy him. I appreciate the work he does. Eventually, I'm going to be included in these smear campaigns as well. One can only hope. Maybe not, though, because I'm so nuanced. I'm very nuanced, as we know. So, and this is all leading up to the Biden administration now getting in on this disinformation racket. And this is a big problem, too, is that it's only shitty right-wing media covering this disinformation czar thing. Literally, there's no actual, reporting on this, liberal reporting on this. It's all National Review, New York Post, Daily Mail, Fox News. Nina Jankovic. You can trust good old Rob, that's right. Everyone knows this. I come to recognize words like dictatorship and authoritarian have become weaponized terms that are largely meaningless to what people are actually saying. I come to take people less seriously when they say it. Yeah, it's just, they're thought-terminating epithets, right? You can never have any nuance in these discussions because you support authoritarianism. You support dictatorship. You support genocide. It's just become ways to completely shut down conversation. Okay.
Just a couple questions on the disinformation board.
Sure.
Yesterday, you had told me that you were not familiar with Nina Jankowicz. I'm wondering if you have more information on her today. Also, Secretary Mayorkas said that he was not familiar with statements that she had made surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop. And I'm just wondering, how was she hired if you in the White House are not familiar with her, if Mayorkas is not familiar with her statements? What's the process for putting her into a position like this?
The whole like authoritarianism thing as well. That's where you see the crossover between what neoliberals believe and what social democrats believe and what anarchists believe. Like, they're all authoritarianism. In all of these different groups, these different ideologies will give you different reasons for why they need to oppose it, but ultimately it's the same. They'll use these same descriptors to talk about these official enemy, these official bad guy states across the ideological spectrum. Authoritarianism bad, liberals believe this, social democrats, anarchists, they're all, when it comes to these unofficial enemy state countries, they're all on the same side. There was a funny Ann Applebaum article about the rise of authoritarianism a few months ago, mentioned nothing about America's support for military coups and shit. Well, that's, again, it's someone else that's actively engaged in this process. One might call it a disinformation campaign, promoting this kind of double genocide theory, which is now she's being trotted out as this like liberal resource about this.
Let me give you a sense of who she is. She's an expert on online disinformation. She was formerly
an expert on online disinformation.
She was formerly a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center. She's testified before Congress as well.
Disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center.
Advised a Ukrainian foreign minister, particularly relevant in this moment, under the auspices of a Fulbright Public Policy Fellowship, and overseeing Russia and Belarus programs at the National Democratic Institute. Any hiring decisions are up to the Department of Homeland Security, but this is a person with extensive qualifications. What I will tell you about the board and what the board is doing, this is a continuation of work that began at the Department of Homeland Security in 2020 under former President Trump.
Is it, though, I guess, can you describe what her job is going to be? Because there's been some TikToks that she has put out, and it seems like rather than, calling balls and strikes on this, story is false, and this story, and here's the truth on it, one line stood out to me. They're laundering disinfo. We should really take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote.
So here's what the board is going to do, which I think is of particular interest. Again, a continuation of the work of the former president. So for anyone who's critical of it, I don't. How's
Psaki still the press secretary? No, she's moving over to continue her job as a liberal propagandist for the MSNBC rather than the actual government.
That they put out,
so she's just moving divisions, basically.
Yesterday, what they noted in there is that this is meant to, one, the first bullet was about protecting privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and the First Amendment. They said the primary mission is to establish best practices to ensure that efforts to understand and respond to disinformation are done in ways that protect privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. I'd also note that the first example they gave about what they're going to do is support the Department of Homeland Security's ongoing work back to the former administration to address how and understand how misinformation spread by human smugglers that prey on vulnerable populations attempting to migrate to the United States. There's no question, everybody, that was bipartisan support for that, to address disinformation that's helping smugglers, helping people migrate, or providing false information, prompting people to migrate.
None of the liberal, pro-democracy, anti-dictatorship people consider the apartheid United States a dictatorship of white people before 65. It's a highly colonial
terrorism, other threats, and see how disinformation and misinformation is being pushed to lead to increase those. So that's all work. We think it's work that's been ongoing for some time. This is the form it's taking, and there's a fact sheet that details the specifics of it.
You just outlined a lot of efforts that sound very worthy, but you've got someone from the Department of Homeland Security telling people how they should vote. How do you explain that to critics who say that doesn't sound right to me?
Don't really care about that. Let's look at this. Let's look at this lady, Nina Jankovic. This is the disinformation expert. With that's the profile pic. This is the disinformation expert that's going to be determining for the United States government what gets classified under this disinformation umbrella and what does not. First, let's check out the Wilson Center. This is her credentials, her rock-solid credentials. Disinformation Fellow at the Wilson Center. Wilson Center, independent research, open dialogue, actionable ideas. Since '68, our nonpartisan insight and analysis has helped power the decisions of policymakers, civic leaders, and the general public across a wide spectrum of beliefs and backgrounds. Okay? Now, we don't want to donate. We do want to look. Located in the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center at 1 Woodrow Wilson Plaza. Ronald Reagan, famously very opposed to disinformation as well. Ronald Reagan, as a figure. We don't want to donate to the Wilson Center. What we do want to know, though, is where they get their funding. So obviously we're seeing it's an affiliate with the United States government. So the idea that it's non-ideological, first and foremost, is complete nonsense, right? This is a United States government affiliated think tank, and it's going to be promoting viewpoints that are supported by that of the State Department and the United States government, regardless of what's going on with the actual funding. Working on diversity inclusion at the Wilson Center. That's nice. Woodrow Wilson, unproblematic President Woodrow Wilson. That's right. What were Woodrow Wilson's thoughts on socialism? That's a good question. We should maybe take a look at that. Not sure. How's the Wilson Center funded? Since '68, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars has been a model for the successful implementation of a public-private partnership. As the official memorial to President Wilson, Congress supports the Wilson Center through an annual appropriation. However, 70% of the annual operating budget must be raised from private sources to ensure the center's continued role in the dialogue of democracy. So at least 30% funded by the United States government. The Development's Office coordinates all of the center's fundraising with a special mandate to secure vital, unrestricted funds. Contributions, primarily gifts and grants from individuals, corporations, and foundations, touch every area of the center's operations. For example, salaries for more than half of the center's staff come from these funds, as do stipends for all the research assistants. Who's contributing to these funds? Individuals, corporations, and foundations. That's all they say. Along with the United States government. This private support is critical to not only in enabling the center to underwrite its established ongoing programs, but to respond in a timely way to current events and emerging issues, and to help create and sustain new programs. The center's Canada and Mexico Institutes, we got a Canada version as well, and the conflict prevention and the foresight of governance projects are all examples of recent initiatives undertaken and supported with private funds. No information on who actually funds this. It's going to their budget. Hard to find this information. I don't even know if it's in here. I don't want to cycle through this PDF that long. But we can tell, though, that it is as much as these places style themselves as being kind of nonpartisan or whatever, this is like directly affiliated with the United States government and is being funded by some corporations and private individuals that we apparently don't have access to. The Kissinger Institute on China, yeah. We have these 5 white guys doing studies into indigenous issues. So this is where the new disinformations came up, I guess. We can probably look into that more. And of course, this is what everyone is pointing out. And again, you know who's pointing this stuff out? It's entirely the right. They're all liberals are okay with this and are running cover for it. And it's only these right-wing ghouls that are actually covering this shit. Because here in October 22nd, she's talking about, she's live tweeting the debate, says, back in the laptop from hell, apparently, Biden notes 50 former NatSec officials and 5 former CIA heads that believe the laptop is a Russian influence op. Trump says, Russia, Russia, Russia. And as we do know now, though, as we are aware, this whole Hunter Biden laptop thing was a legitimate story that was intentionally discredited through these accusations of Russian disinformation. And you have these mainstream media outlets that buried this story, at the request of the US government because they said this is Russian disinformation while there was this election going on. And yes, Orange Man bad, but I think 2 things can be bad. The Orange Man and also the United States government covering up vital news stories by putting it under the umbrella of Russian disinformation. I think both of these things are bad. Nina Jankowicz. So, but I mean, similarly to that, the disinformation research outlet that we were looking into a few weeks ago, which was funded by Soros and by Pierre Omidyar and these other tech billionaires, people that have literal documented connections to the coup government in Ukraine in 2014 and earlier. They were the ones funding these disinformation police to determine who was sharing Russian disinformation on Twitch. And now you have Nina Jankowicz working for the US government, who got experience working for a think tank funded by the US government, and whoever, God knows how other billionaires are funding that. These are the people that are now determining what is and is not Russian disinformation, and what powers the government or these private businesses have to ensure that no one is sharing this kind of harmful disinformation. Like, if you're not alarmed by that, I think that's like, we really need to just be able to, even if, again, taking out any personal feelings about people that are being affected by this, whether you don't like Danny Haifong, whether you don't like Jackson Hinkle or these fucking guys, remove all of that. Remove all of your personal feelings about any of this stuff, about the people sharing this information, and about like the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Even if you do kind of don't take Russia's side and don't want to have any nuance about that. Remove all your personal feelings about that. And just, we have to ask ourselves, like, whether we're comfortable with these big think tanks and the US government being able to now go in and censor views that run contrary to this State Department aligned viewpoint under the guise of Russian disinformation or Chinese disinformation, which we all know it's going to eventually be. It's the same shit article written about Prashad some time ago. Yeah, it's like anyone that's asking these questions that gets to a certain level of platform is going to have these accusations hurled at them. We're next on the list. Well, that's the thing. I don't doubt that eventually this magnifying glass is gonna get turned on me. I have no doubt. And the Woodrow Wilson. Oh man. A Wilson Center director was arrested in Tehran trying to start a revolution back in 2007. What the fuck? Oh, and look, I've got another quote about this as well that's going to blow people's minds. Iran sees soft revolution in U.S. academics' work. Halek Esfandiari, the director of the U.S. Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars Middle East program, was detained on May 8th and taken to Tehran's Elvin prison, the center and her family previously said. In the primary interrogations, she said the Soros Center in Iran had an unofficial communication network and was trying to develop and expanding it to follow up its soft revolution aims. And that raises the question as well. You know, we talk about Russia and whether they have any legitimacy in pushing back against the West, arming and training militia groups right on their border. When these kind of things happen, and we have people that are like connected to these NGOs getting scooped up in Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or wherever, or China or wherever else, what right do these societies have to push back when they know these campaigns are taking place and they know people connected to the U.S. government are poking around in there? Like, it's not like they have a great track record. But check out this quote from Nina here. Oh, where's the quote that I found? Yeah, this is from September. This is okay. You folks are gonna laugh at this. This is Nina Jankowicz, the new disinformation czar for the Biden administration and the U.S. government. This is her in September 18th, 2020. This tweet says, "You may have seen the term, quote, color revolution floating around social media the past few days. Let's talk about what they are and why the U.S. isn't a candidate for one." Let's hear from, what's her name? Nina. Let's hear from Nina about the color revolutions that the U.S. is, and or her herself are in no way involved with.
Color revolutions have nothing to do with race. The term was coined in the early 2000s when countries like the Republic of Georgia and Ukraine had spontaneous, peaceful, democratic revolutions that had colorful nicknames. In 2003, the Georgian opposition protested the opening of a new session of parliament based on fraudulent election results. They did it while carrying roses, hence the Rose Revolution. In 2004 and 2005, Ukrainians protested their...
Oh, by the way, color revolution started in 2004 as well. That's interesting. That's misinformation of itself. Color revolutions. Oh, there's something that people started saying about Ukraine in 2004. Queen of Lies, Lana, I'm glad you're still watching. I'm glad you in particular are still watching this.
Their own rigged election. Candidate Viktor Yushchenko's campaign branding was orange, hence the Orange Revolution. You get the idea. Color
really
revolutions have earned a bad
colors.
rap, though, mostly thanks to Vladimir Putin, because they brought in... idea. Color revolutions have earned a bad rap, though, mostly thanks to Vladimir Putin, because they brought in democratically minded governments that threatened Russian influence in the region. Putin likes to suggest they are CIA organized. That is not true. Believe it or not, sometimes people get fed up with having their voices silenced for decades. Putin's narratives intentionally rob protesters of agency. They discount the grievances that brought them to the streets, risking their lives, and ultimately, they undermine the resulting governments. And now we're seeing the same narrative cropping up here in the United States. Here's why it doesn't fit. First of all, in case we've forgotten, protest is a democratic right. You are entitled to it no matter your opinion. Second of all, color revolutions happen in autocracies, when people are fed up with the indignities of an entrenched regime. While we have witnessed some democratic backsliding here in the United States, we are not an autocracy. We still have checks and balances. We still enjoy democratic rights. Certainly, we are not Georgia in 2003, Ukraine in 2004, or Belarus today. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, these events usually happen in response to a rigged election. Even today, we should still have the confidence that our votes will be counted fairly and accurately. I do. And as a reminder, there's only one candidate who is tweeting about rigged election results. So, in short, color revolutions aren't dirty. They're expressions of democratic will, and they should inspire us all. P.S. Make sure you're registered to vote and make a voting plan today.
This is the Biden administration's new disinformation czar. Are we comfortable with this? I don't even know what to say about this. I actually didn't watch this entire clip before looking at it just now. And it's significantly more deranged than I imagined it was. CIA black sites aren't dirty and are an expression of democracy. I mean, so this fucking spook, I'm sorry, let's call her what it is, who works for this think tank associated with that's funded by the United States government and God knows who else, downplaying the idea of what a color revolution is, downplaying the role that the U.S. has played in countless countries long before 2004, in countless countries, undermining the democratic process and engaging in this kind of like destabilization efforts, which we know they were doing in 2004 in Ukraine, wandered through this NGO complex featuring people like Soros. And we know they engaged in 2014 as well, when you have the fucking Deputy Secretary of State openly plotting about who's going to take over the government while this was going on. You've got John McCain and all these folks going over there and like high-fiving the protesters, Hillary Clinton and all these people. And they're saying that they have no involvement in that. In fact, color revolutions are actually good things. These are the people that are being entrusted into this overcoming the scourge of disinformation and determining what is and is not disinformation and determining who can say what on social media and who needs to be purged and eliminated and canceled and silenced. Again, oh, check out her TikTok. Oh my God. Oh my God. They're using their biolabs to summon these McMansion-dwelling demons using Nazi blood magic. I don't doubt it. Someone link me a TikTok. Come on. Someone link it to me. Link me the TikTok. Fuck it. You know what I mean, though? If you're watching this, please divorce yourself any emotional feelings you have about the people that are being caught up in this web or these actual events themselves, even if you do think Russia is the worst place in the world and they're committing this terrible imperialist assault. Try to recognize what is going on here. Try and engage in a little game theory here and ask yourself where this is going to go. When these are the people that are in charge of this battle against disinformation. If no one's going to link it, I'm going to look myself. If no one's going to link the TikTok, I'm looking myself.
First of all,
we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
She made it private.
Please no Rob, not the TikToks.
Thank you, Daka Dude. Thank you for the 200 friend coin. This is honestly beyond parody. Like I dissociated while I watched this. I'll show you a fucking TikTok, man. Fucking, yeah. I'm gonna need to TikTok now myself in order to confront the fucking psychic damage I'm taking from looking at this stuff. What an amazing clip. My goodness. That was really like significantly worse than I imagined it was gonna be. I was doing live face IRL. President Xi, I'm literally begging you to take back control of American TikTok from Oracle because this is a living nightmare. year 3 of TRRS, Rob will be doing bong rips on screen. Oh my. Have they blamed COVID on Putin yet? I mean, blaming it on China, I think, was their plan number one. So, they just blamed it on China. They've shifted more back to Russia now that the conflict has taken off. But, like we talked about, since we started talking about this new Cold War shit on the show, I mean, China has been the target of that for the last couple of years. If anything, right now, there's just a little bit of reprieve from the anti-China hysteria because they've shifted to anti-Russia hysteria. Here we go. Thank you. Jane. Thank you. Someone in this community came through. Here's more from our disinformation expert.
Laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared that intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo and we really should take note.
Fucking theater kids.
Their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote. Oh, laundering is really.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
She's the worst.
It's a fucking literally a US government spook with the like Leslie Knope plus theater kid energy. This is where liberalism has gone in the West now. Lack of XP, thank you very much for the 11 months of tier 1. Thanks, Lack of XP. Folks, I'm 2.5 hours into this stream, okay? I'm at 3 subs. All right? I have to put the image on the screen. I have to take a break from talking about this. I've gone a good 2 hours talking about this subject.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk.
I need a mental break. You need a break. We all need a break from this beat.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hold on. I'm not finished yet. You can
count on me. You're gonna have good old
very
Rob
rude.
to talk you through all this.
Very rude.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk
It's
you
enough
through
now.
all this.
Stop this.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
What is this? Tula using Mammal, thank you for the gifted tier 1 sub. John McCain's Ghost, thank you for the gifted tier 1 sub.
We simply use the computer to mark up the
Part Ian.
size of the account.
Part Ian, thanks for gifting a sub. Quetz TTV, thank you for gifting a sub. Moss World, thanks for gifting a sub. Regular Mole Rat Dragon, thanks for the 234 friend coin. I think that's everyone that just gifted. You know, who knows how long this channel's even going to be around, folks. Eventually I'm going to be removed too, because of disinformation.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
You may not even have to ask me to make these requests anymore in the future. Thank you, Gen X Bushy.
You've just become an elite member of the
Oh my
Friendship
goodness,
Triangle.
Dakadoon, oh my gosh.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Thank you, Dakadoon, so much for the 10 gifted subs. Very, very generous, very kind of you, Dakadoon. And thanks also to Gen X Bushy for the 5 gifted subs and all the support you've shown also. Really appreciated.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
That's what I have to say about that. I'm being so careful about what I say now, it's nuts. I'm just a game streamer. I'm just here to play a little indie game. You wouldn't shut down a little indie game streamer on her birthday? Yeah. Seriously. Very alarming climate that's brewing up here. And like what I always try to tie back into it too, it's like this new Red Scare shit, we're barely even scratching the surface of it. That's why I'm alarmed, right?
Count on me.
We're barely scratching the surface.
To talk you through all this.
How bad this shit is gonna get. Comrade Social Distancing, thank you so much for the 2 gifted subs. Thank you very much. Sorry about the Raptors, was really hoping for a Game 7. Yeah, thanks, Dakadoon. It was a good season. I was disappointed, but I wasn't like devastated. I would have been pretty devastated if they had been swept. They were able to force 6 games, so I was disappointed, but it wasn't like crushing. You know? No Game 7s. I did really want a Game 7 in Philadelphia. It would have been so great. Okay. I'm just going to take a moment to go pee after this as well. Any more takers? We're 10 away. 10 away from the sub goal. I'm still going to stick around for another hour at least. So, it's not like I'm leaving. I'm going anywhere. I cannot, I'm gonna not be able to get over that video.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all
that was so much worse than I thought it was gonna be. The thing about the color revolutions. Alana, thank you so much for the 3 gifted subs. Thank you, Alana. I appreciate that a lot. She had a place in his life when
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Think twice. As she rises to her apology, anybody else would surely know. Is watching her go. And sees a white man has the power to reason away. Lack of XP, thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs. Really appreciate that. And if you want to operate in the Chaos Zone, you can do that. You can do that. Nothing at all. The CIA has assembled a crack team of theater kids whose ultimate weapon is to annoy you to death. If that doesn't work, they have neo-Nazis on standby. Seriously, they're gonna bring me one of these, like, nondescript government buildings like in 1984. What's the room in 1984? The special room they bring him to? I can't remember. and it's just these like spook theater kids singing you what you have to believe. How long really would you be able to hold out? Probably 10 minutes in and be like, okay, I'm a neoliberal. You win. I agree with you. Please just stop singing to me. Watching her go. Leaves in the sea. The wise man has the power. Reason away. Room 101. Keep to agree. And always better than nothing. Nothing at all. They put a black bag on your head and half an hour later you're forced to witness a production of Cats. Yeah, there's prior they're giving you the eye drops. They have your eyes in that thing like Clockwork Orange. They're giving you the eye drops. I think Rob messed up the lyrics earlier. I don't believe so. What do you vibe as the consensus in your area in Canada? They buying Ukraine doesn't have a neo-Nazi problem. I mean, like, I live in Montreal, so there's probably a fairly wide array of viewpoints here, in where I am. But I think throughout Canada, it's pretty uniform. Like, I was driving through, I was visiting my parents, like 2 weeks ago, and my mom was telling me about how, like, everyone is just immediately 100% pro-Ukraine. People had Ukraine flags. I was driving through the city and, like, on the highway. I could see people's houses were, like, lit up. The Ukrainian flags in the front yard. At this point, the MIDI version of the music is more real. I love that track, that real deal. The Real Deal Doobie Brothers version of that song. Fucking wonderful. It's a mixed bag here, though I live in a gentrifying area, and in the more bougie areas, you can see Ukraine flags more. Yeah, I mean, I live in we rent the people that can afford to live in this neighborhood are on a separate class level than me, to say the least. So I imagine that has some kind of impact to it. I don't see a lot of Ukraine flags, though, anywhere around here. Winnipeg is plastered in Ukrainian flags. God, it's fucking weird to see this spread, right? My upper middle class lib friends have the flags and their names on Twitter, and I haven't seen them in 2 years, and I don't know what I'll do when I do. Yeah. And that's true, Lana. The prairies is where the UCC stronghold is, so it's got to be nuts over there. That's what I mean. This country has the second largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world, so it's not surprising, especially that it's been easy to get people on board with this. Although that's not to say that it's just Ukrainians that are participating in this. Yeah. That's where they're the descendants of these Ukrainian fascists that were imported into the country after World War II. All these like Banderites, then they've been essential to the creation of this ultranationalist Ukrainian identity, which did not exist. It did not exist, and it's been created. It was created by fascist like partisans in Ukraine, nationalists. The Banderites, who committed horrible atrocities, and then over the decades, this has been revitalized. Right? It's been rejuvenated. It's been reanimated. It's been brought back to life. This Ukrainian nationalist identity. Chrystia Freeland, that's her grandfather's life work, and it's her own life work as well, and weaponized. And now we're seeing this, all the work that's gone into that, developing that, this switch has gotten flipped. It's like MK Ultra shit. It really is. After decades of laying the groundwork of this Ukrainian nationalist identity that didn't exist, as soon as the switch got flipped, now you've got to support this. Everyone has to support this. And everyone just says, whoa, okay. It's too bad because the UCC has been insanely vicious towards socialist Ukrainians in Canada over the years. This is the whole reason organizations like the UCC exist, is to destroy the left. Right? And that's the thing. That's the false when we talk about Ukraine and saying that Ukraine is just this country full of fascists. It isn't. You know, there's a long streak. Many millions of Ukrainians joined the Red Army and fought the Nazis very correctly. Many of them were dedicated socialists. Many of them loved being part of the Soviet Union. One could argue the majority of people. This existed in the diaspora in Canada, and we brought these Ukrainian fascists who now make up the UCC in order to destroy this movement, in order to ensure that our Ukrainian diaspora would not be left-wing in this country. Right? And it's the descendants of these kind of left-wing Ukrainians that are now being persecuted in Ukraine and have been for the last several years. Even in 91, most Ukrainians voted to remain a part of the USSR and uphold socialism. What's the UCC? It's like this. It's the Ultranationalist United Ukrainian Conference, I believe, is what it stands for, right? That are like, they're the sort of political arm of the right-wing Ukrainian diaspora in Canada, heavily connected to Chrystia Freeland. In fact, how fucked up that is, when Chrystia Freeland was at that event where she was holding the flag, the UPA flag, in the statement in response to that from Chrystia Freeland, in the statement there was a quote from, not her, but from the UCC. They were literally handling her like political issues for her. Very fucked up. Look at OG smiling. Love OG. And look, that right there in the YouTube recommendations. What a Fool Believes. Michael McDonald. Okay, what am I putting on here?
Let sleeping dogs lie. I say, no! And you know what sleeping dogs I'm referring to, don't you? No? Well, let me refresh your memory. Russians. That's right. Russians, Ruskies, communists. Communists.
This was... When did this come out? Was 93? 93 this came out. This parody of this exact kind of rhetoric. Glad that we've made a lot of progress since then.
Oh, now you remember. Well, do you also remember how a few years ago all we ever talked about was how the Russians were going to take over the world, and how every household would be run by communists and their filthy communism? Oh, yeah, we feared the Russians back in them days, and for good reason, too. But now all I ever hear is, poor little Russia, they've got no money. Poor little Russia, they've gone broke. Poor little Russia this, and poor little Russia that. Don't you get it? Am I the only one that gets it? It's a trick. Communism never dies. Communism is a cancer sleeping, awaiting the moment to devour our freedom, to devour democracy. Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this guy's just some right-wing paranoid reactionary who had a horrible upbringing and whose father beat him every day with a Bible. Well, maybe that's true, but it never did me any harm. All I'm saying is, a few years ago, people used to listen to me. I fit in. Well, listen to me now. The Russians, they're going to try to take over the world again. Don't you forget that for 1 second, friend, or else you'll find yourself lining up for toilet paper in some godless world. There's one more thing I'd like to say. Killer bees. Forgot about them, didn't you? Well, that's just what they want us to do. That's right. The Russian communists, the killer bees, they're like this. So when people say to me, let sleeping dogs lie, I say to them, friend, sleeping dogs, they eventually wake up and chew out the throat of democracy. Don't you think I don't know what you're up to, Russia? Don't think I'm unaware of the fact that Kevin McDonald, or should I say, Ivan Chofsky is one of you.
He's crazy!
Crazy like a fanatic. Fox, I mean. Down red. One man, one vote. Multi-party representative democracy.
I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Some people look at a flag swaying in the breeze at the White House and they say, that's America. Me, whenever I see an American flag hung in the window of a basement apartment by guys who have better things to do with their money than buy curtains, I say, that's America to me. In America, there are 51 states, or maybe it's 80 by now. Does England count? I'm not quite sure. The one thing I am sure of, though, is if I'm standing in a warehouse beside a time clock and a guy is punching in for his best friend who is too hungover to get out of bed, I'm standing in America, the makeover capital of the world, the place where every young man has to answer in his heart the question, what do you love more, your girlfriend or your car? And where that young man can buy a beat-up car for $300 and has to spend $1,000 to insure it. Where else can even a paperboy option the film rights to a book? A woman on an assembly line works out her overtime in her head to infinity. And at the exact same moment, her husband gets into a car accident because he's looking at a girl in a tube top. In America, where spelling doesn't count, people's pets do. Where else can a guy get a job riding a whale at Marineland? But in America. In America, a guy's girlfriend breaks up with him over the phone. So he gets a gun and kills the principal. Everyone is sad until they get the day off. Next week, another guy, another gal, another we can still be friends phone call. Uh-oh, the assistant principal gets it. And everyone's sad because they don't get the day off. Because he's just the assistant principal. America, a land of opportunity. Yes, that great lumbering beast that journeys tirelessly, stops only to eat a clubhouse sandwich, pick its teeth with a matchbook cover, and fall asleep with the TV on. Again, America, a place for Americans.
God, what a thing of beauty. Great handshake. Gerald, Mr. Tolson, how are you?
Pretty good. Listen, I'm sorry I'm late. You know, traffic.
Right. Yeah, traffic. Try that on me, huh?
You're right. That excuse you gave me works great.
Yeah, doesn't it, though? Doesn't it, huh? So why were you late, anyway?
Traffic.
Wow, life imitates excuses. Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, look out here, Gerald. There's a sea of businessmen. The ripples and eddies you catch with your eye, those are the important guys. The name of the game is networking. Businessmen meeting other businessmen for the purpose of meeting again at a later date. Do you understand?
Networking.
Yeah. Now, but you gotta be cool. See that guy? He's trying way too hard.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, so don't blow it.
I won't.
Just be cool. All
Right
right.
on.
Okay, here we go. Tony!
Gerald.
How are you, man?
Pretty good. Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, this is the guy I was telling you about. Well, I would have told you about if I had been able to get you on the phone.
Oh, yeah? I was on the other line. Good to see you. What's your name?
Nick.
Nick. What do you do, Nick?
Well, I'm just starting out.
Super. That's a great way to break in.
Yeah, well, I hope to break in and get hot.
Yeah. That's a great idea, isn't it? Hope to see you on a mailing list someday.
Great. See you then.
Okay. Listen, I'm gonna stand a few feet away.
Sure, Tony, sure.
Wow.
What'd I tell you?
Wow.
Yeah?
Bet he can do something for me someday.
Hey, well, he knows you. Can that hurt?
No way. Now we're networking.
You're right. Holy cow. That is a merger. That's a merger. Oh, there's another guy I know. Hey, Kutska, come over here. Kutska, come here. Come on. Hey, this is the guy I was telling you about. Come here. Kutska, come here. Don't let me be standing here. Come here. Put that down. Come here. Okay, maybe later. Real important guy, very busy. Player, definitely a player.
Do you think he can do something for me someday?
Well, he saw you. Can that hurt?
No,
No,
it can't.
No, it can't. Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot of buzz that you're hot even though you're just starting out.
Yes, I believe that I am hot.
Well, you're going to be needing one of these then.
It's a business card. Take it.
So, Jerry, do you like professional sports?
Ha! By God, I do! Yes, indeed! Why, I cheer for all the local teams.
Really? They're not as good as they used to be, I hear.
Nothing's as good as it used to be.
Except money.
Money!
This is business, yeah.
I'm the hot guy.
This is it. This is all it is. It is still unmatched. I'm looking forward to the new one. G-Clappy, did you ever see the Kids in the Hall film, Brain Candy? Has anyone ever seen that movie? That might have to be a movie night movie, actually. Because it's so funny. It's hilarious. Lodane had the poster. Of course he did, Lodane. I've seen Brain Candy. Brain Candy is so great. It's so funny. We're gonna do that. Bit of an aside, but I just passed the manhunt part of Native Son. Such a tragic story, tough read, but also so good. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I should probably reread that. Such an influential book for me, but I probably haven't. I think it would be a lot more meaningful even looking at it now with the 20 years of knowledge of experience that I have from when I first read it. But so many modern parallels, right? Old Dutch, like it's like when you talk about, black people in America and the police and the criminal justice system, it's like literally nothing has really advanced, really. Where it's 72 degrees in your head all the time. Anyway, I think that's all I have for the disinformation beat today. This is something I'm sure we're going to continue talking about, though. Like I said, it's going to continue to escalate in terms of like how much of a problem it is. That disinformation czar, that was really something else, though. Oh my goodness. That was really something else. And do you know what? Sorry, this is like while we're on this is like a sketch comedy thing. This is totally my favorite. Do they have the sketch on YouTube? They've got a reaction to the sketch, The Hall of Mirrors. I don't know if they have the clip on YouTube though. I love that sketch so much. They only have a 30-second clip. That's unfortunate. I love that one. I shouldn't stick around too much longer. Yeah, I think I can stick around for another 20 minutes. When I was just upstairs, now my kid really wants me to bring him to get a Slurpee. He was very adamant when I was just upstairs just now, letting the cat out of the basement, that I go and get him a Slurpee with him. I'm gonna have to do that soon. I would like to play more No Man's Sky. I don't think I have time to do that right now. But definitely on a couple nights this week, when I have nights free, I'll come down and do more No Man's Sky. Gaming Zone. She's also an online feminist, so you know the pushback will be, okay, sweaty, those incels can't stand to see a strong woman succeed. Well, here's the problem also on Electable Airwaves, like I was saying, because liberals are totally okay with this, and a lot of quote-unquote leftists are getting pulled into this, like, pro-Ukraine camp. The only people that are raising alarm bells about this kind of disinformation stuff is, like, people like Danny, Haifong, and the folks that are being targeted by this stuff, or the right. The right-wingers are the only ones that are raising alarm bells to this, which allows people to just suggest that it's not important or that it should be discarded. That's a really big problem. The fact when I was looking at that for news stories about that disinformation czar woman, it's all just the New York Post and these ghoulish right-wing outlets that are freaking out about it. Which makes liberals, then when you start asking the similar questions, they just assume that you're one of these people. In my brain, I pronounce No Man's Sky as if we're a Polish name, like Nomansky. Yeah. It makes anti-imperialism seem insane. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And that's why I think some of these visible anti-imperialists who are just constantly making fools of themselves are ops in and of themselves. And these are the people that are getting caught up in this net of disinformation, and because we don't like them, it makes us okay with this process. Because it's like, there's people getting banned. I mean, I just don't really like them, so whatever. I'm not going to complain about it too much. I saw the Twitch politics debate after Haz got banned. They were all spiking the football. Yeah, there we go. And it's also that's what I mean, Lana. It's also producing the Pat Soak phenomenon. That's why I think it is. I swear that is an op. I feel like there's multiple people involved in these conversations that are ops, and sometimes these ops are like working against each other. Maybe they don't even know that they're ops. Not me though. Not us. No ops over here. I'm going to have to come up with some kind of discrete signal to send you guys if I ever get caught up in an op myself. If they ever try and flip me, and I'm not able to talk about it, I'm going to have some kind of signal to you guys, so you know what's going on, that I've been compromised. I'm going to have to work that out. Infiltrators everywhere, but if a movement is organized, it can overcome saboteurs. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole thing with like the CPUSA and everything. How I'm sure they've been infiltrated by feds for decades. And then you have these guys infiltrating the party and talking about like doing this kind of entryism project and taking over the party. You got to wonder if they're maybe connected to that push. Just a product of American politics being treated like a brand identity rather than a matter of principle. It's like a grab bag for a lot of people. Yeah. I don't know how anyone on the left can live through the Iraq era and then decide, yeah, the State Department is telling the truth. This is the unescapable issue here on Electable Airwaves over the last couple of weeks. I just feel like there's so many people that should know better that get pulled into it. And it's like, I genuinely don't understand how you can live through the last 20 years and still give these folks the benefit of the doubt. Why are we giving the State Department, the United States State Department, the benefit of the doubt? That's the question. What else needs to happen for people to just assume, first and foremost, that they're lying, that they're behind everything? What needs to happen? What needs to happen for people to just jump to that conclusion first and foremost with any one of these incidents? Keep pushing the no-op message, Rob. Great work. Thank you, Mr. Cypher, sir. That's why I think it's a op. My name is Matt, by the way. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. But I mean, yeah, part of it is an op, but part of it is just that people get manipulated by the op, you know? People still allow themselves, because of these ideological underpinnings, they still allow themselves to be manipulated by these big mass media campaigns. Matthew, journalist? Oh, goodness. Yes, Slava Ukraini, Free Palestine, anti-abortion, and pro-land back. It's the employment of this left-wing language, I think, in service of this stuff that discourages me the most. Wearing a green hat would be very traditional Chinese coded message. Oh, that's good to know. That's a good idea. If what you believe is not true, would you want to know? It's scary for people. Yeah, I see that too. I get that. It seems like there's so many people that lived through the last 20 years that should know better by now. That's the discouraging thing. You know, that's the really discouraging thing. And when I see people that have made big names for themselves in like left media, going around and like dunking on people that are the Russian propagandists and stuff. Look at these fake anti-imperialists supporting Putin's imperialist war by sharing these narratives. It's just like, oh man, we're way less far along than what I thought we were. Oh boy, folks. We're through the looking glass here, people. This is why we like the TRRS community, though, isn't it? I really do want to play No Man's Sky. I think most people are a product of their society and not ops, but it's extremely credulous to think media ops don't happen. Of course they do. It's a matter of who has the power to craft narratives. Yeah, and I mean, similar to the thing about color revolutions, Lana, right? Like, a lot of it is organic. I think that's the point that I've tried to make when we talk about these possible color revolutions happening, is not to make this suggestion that when there's a potential color revolution happening, that every single person that is involved is being handed sacks of cash from the CIA or the State Department. I don't think that. No one should think that. There is this organic element. Many of these times these movements do start because of genuine discontent. It's not this though. It's the way that these then US government-backed forces, the NGO complex, they launder the state like through these kind of these third parties. Then they get involved in the funding and the organizing and giving it political direction, who infiltrates and uses them, right? So it's the same thing. When it comes to these people online or these like online leftists that don't get this shit, I don't think these people are all ops either, but I do think there are people giving little pokes and prods here and there and helping create situations where people start to organically believe the proper thing, the good thing, according to the U.S. State Department, So that's what I mean. It's like the same thing when it's color revolutions. It's the same thing with these media ops that are happening domestically. Not every single person that's participating in this thing is part of some devious operation, or they are, and they're not aware of it, and they've been put in that position and led to believe certain things kind of unwillingly. And that's as talking about color revolutions as well. Even when we talk about the organic nature of color revolutions, like Ian's pointing out in the chat, even if you can point out the organic nature of these color revolutions in Ukraine or Venezuela or Cuba or elsewhere, you also have the state, the U.S. State Department and the West, NATO, whatever institution, like these Western institutions, putting their thumb on the scale through economic warfare, which is imperialism, and creating these conditions that lead to the organic discontent. So yes, there are people that genuinely do become discontented with certain things, but they're also being deliberately put in that position because these like economic or cultural conditions are being deliberately enforced on these countries. Yeah, Hong Kong, of course it was. And of course there's very legitimate pro-democracy activists from Hong Kong. There's like a left in Hong Kong, absolutely. But was the U.S. State Department influencing that movement? Were they trying to benefit from it? Were they propping it up in their media establishment? Yeah, of course they were. Yeah. Anytime, again, it's not fucking rocket science. When you see the leader of these color revolutions, these organic revolutions show up in the United States Congress hanging out with U.S. senators, it's pretty fucking clear what's happening. It's when the writing is really on the wall at that point. When you have people being imported into the United States to go give tours, getting tours of the U.S. Congress or being singled out in State of the Union speeches or whatever, yeah, then it's pretty fucking clear what's going on. And people still don't want to admit it. That's the problem. People still don't want to admit that this stuff is going on. The U.S. trades weapons to violent cartels in Latin America for drugs, which they turn around and pump into low-income neighborhoods here in the U.S. Yeah, they've been doing that for decades as well. That we know about. The white helmets, yeah. People don't like admitting they got worked. That's a big part of it. But also people, ultimately, I think a lot of these folks are still Western chauvinists and ultimately do, even if they don't want to admit it, still believe in a lot of these narratives about Western exceptionalism and the dangerous enemies that we face and all that stuff, and the good intentions that people have in these institutions, this kind of stuff. If your independence movement is involved with the U.S. government, it's either an op or about to be co-opted. Yeah. Again, this shit should not be complicated. It should not be complicated.
you can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Booty Dude 69. Thank you for the 4 months of Tier 1 Booty Dude 69. Thank you. Putin equals bad is such a huge component of narrative manufacturing over the last 20 years that it's hard to disengage it from your psyche. Yeah, and again, the real anti-Russia gators were right. You know, I gotta admit that the people that were like really adamantly opposed to the whole Russiagate phenomenon were 100% proven correct, because that laid the groundwork for everything that's going on now. Yeah, we'll raid Keffels. Thank you, Red Wizard, for the gifted sub. I appreciate that, Red Wizard. Look at that, we made the sub goal. Thank you, folks. Thank you, I love you. Thank you, friends. Later, Lana. Lana, I appreciate that you've been hanging out in the chat and in the Discord and stuff lately. It's been great to have you hanging out with us. By Rorb. Not actually my name, but okay. Lily Wachowski on Keffel stream in 30 minutes. Oh, that's very cool. I will be back at some point this weekend, I think. You know, it was basically when I have the night free. Sometimes I don't always know when I will, but I'll try to come back maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow night, and do some more No Man's Sky, because I really did enjoy that. The Gaming Zone, that's right. If you're not in there already, join the Discord server. The Most Film YouTube channel. Most Film was an old Soviet film production collective, streamed the Soviet War movie Hot Snow earlier. It's really brilliant. I'd recommend it. Most Film was a ton of great Soviet movement with subs all free. Oh, it sounds great, Crad Babes. Thanks for that tip. That sounds like something we could put on as background stuff here sometimes as well. Happy May Day. Oh, by the way, we're still here. Another 30 seconds or so. Luna Oi on TRRS on Monday. We're going to be talking about the shameful imperialist defeat, the retreat from Saigon, May Day, Vietnam War, imperialism, all that stuff. We love Luna. She's going to be coming back on Monday, 2 p.m. Talk to you then.